The past nearly 15 years of Transformers have seen several new versions of the Autobots and Decepticons stories told. Some of them went on to be critically acclaimed and introduced brand new elements to the almost 40-year-old franchise like Transformers Prime and Cyberverse. Others like Rescue Bots and its sort of sequel series Rescue Bots Academy have been able to introduce brand new generations of fans of the Transformers universe. And then some have tried stuff that wasn't really universally loved, but hey, A forever for trying new things. However, with the exception of Rescue Bots, pretty much every single Transformers show released over the past 15 years has had the same underlying summary, the same essential storyline the whole franchise has had since its inception in 1984. Optimus vs. Megatron, Bumblebee vs. Steeljaw, Autobots vs. Decepticons. Or Maximals vs. Predacons too, I guess. Now, there's nothing wrong with that premise at all for a Transformers story. The whole concept of the franchise was literally built on good robots versus bad robots, and it's worked very well. With how popular the G1 show was back in the 80s, then Beast Wars, the Unicron trilogy, animated, the Bayverse movies, it's surely a profitable formula, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it and all that. But the thing is, times change. For politics, culture, entertainment, everything. Sci-fi as a genre changed. Where we once had simple good versus evil stories in the 80s and 90s, stuff really started to change in the late 2000s. And before you go all tell me that shows did this stuff back in the 80s and 90s, I know, they existed. But the thing was, those kind of shows were very niche at the time, and they still can be up until about the mid-2010s, I'd say. Sure, in the 2000s and early 2010s, we got proper nuance in our Transformers stories, though. Animated focus on a ragtag group of newcomers going up against seasoned veterans of war and trying to overcome a corrupt government. Prime focused on a small group of Autobots driven to desperation in a dark, gritty combination of Bayverse and G1 with a storytelling style of Beast Wars. And then RID-15 focused on a ragtag group of newcomers going up against a seasoned veterans of war and trying to overcome a corrupt government. Oh wait, you see what I'm getting at here? There's nothing inherently wrong with these stories' concepts. They're fun to watch and experience, have fun characters, and so on. They each have their own pros and cons. Cyberverse tried to break free of this formula by featuring storylines such as Bumblebee getting his memories back with Windblade over the course of the first season, and then the Autobots and Decepticons working together to battle the Quintessence in Season 3. But once again, these stories were only possible because the main story of the show was still Autobots versus Decepticons. Good robots versus bad robots. Is that a gross simplification of the Transformers franchise as a whole? Yeah, probably. But is it wrong? I don't think so. Especially with what other corners of the Transformers franchise had gotten done while these shows were still going on. From 2005 to 2018 and later 2019 to 2022, the comic book company IDW Publishing ran their own comics about Transformers. For the first 7 years of the franchise, it was pretty much your cookie-cutter Autobots vs. Decepticons story. Sure, it had new stuff, like for the first time ever putting the Transformers undercover, a concept that would be reused for the Bayverse movies and Primes a few years later, and having far more brutal stories to tell, like the Decepticons nearly leveling New York City and Overlord turning a prison colony into a pretty much a Lord of the Flies situation. Not to mention Starscream becoming such a shoddy leader of Decepticons, he was practically forced to order cons to cannibalize each other to survive. Until, of course, Megatron came back, beat Starscream near death in the most brutal fashion we'd ever seen in the franchise. At least until Cyberverse. But after 7 years of this back and forth with Megatron, Optimus, Rodimus, Starscream, Bumblebee, and others, IDW did the unthinkable. They essentially put an end to the war storyline that had been told from 2005 to 2012 with a one-shot called The Death of Optimus Prime. It's not a literal title, I swear. Anyway, the comic focused on Optimus essentially being tired of being, well, Optimus. Megatron was presumed dead, the war was over, and he didn't want to deal with politics anymore. So what did Optimus do? He ripped the Matrix leadership in half, gave each to B and Rodimus, and left Cybertron. That split the comics into two new storylines. One following Bumblebee and Robots in the Skies, and later Optimus Prime. Optimus didn't stay gone for long. And one following Rodimus in Mortar Meets the Eye and later Lost Light. These comics were new, unique. RID focused on essentially a political drama, one where B and Starscream try to each become the new ruler of Cybertron. Mortar Meets the Eye, on the other hand, focused on Rodimus and a merry band of other Autobots and Decepticons going on a galaxy and time-spanning road trip through space. The two stories came together a few years later in a crossover event called Dark Cybertron. Long story short, Bumblebee died, for a while at least, Optimus came back, Starscream became ruler of Cybertron, and most surprisingly, Megatron became an Autobot. Pay attention to this fact because we'll come back to it later. Lastly, a new Transformer was introduced as well, Windblade. She got her own spin-off comic at this time, meant to replace Robots in the Skies as the IEW continuity's political drama, when RID shifted focus instead to Optimus dealing with Earth's prejudices towards Cybertron. This series ran for 12 issues and was followed by another called Till All Are One. These comics focused on Windblade and Starscream trying to navigate the political landscape of Cybertron, and introduced several new colony worlds into the TF franchise. Caminus, the home of Windblade, the Velocitron home to speed-focused Transformers like Knockout, and Eucharis, where most of the Maximals and Predacons come from in this continuity. Now, you might be thinking, Sonic, these comics sound cool and all, but what do they have to do with this video? Well, let's circle back to the point I made earlier. The one where I said that for the most part, Transformers as a franchise is, say it with me everybody, good robots versus bad robots. Instead of this old concept, the comics told much more complex stories. Stuff like PTSD war veterans suffer after conflict, anxiety and depression, how victims of abuse cope long after said abuse, and finding love in a world amidst all these struggles. For a while, these comics were the only Transformers stories telling these kind of stories. Until now. When Transformers EarthSpark made its world premiere on Paramount Plus in November of 2022, it finally broke the molds completely for nearly 40 years of Transformers television. For once, the story wasn't about Autobots battling Decepticons, or Maximals battling Predacons. We had a new cast, a new focus, the story of a brand new species of Transformers, the Terrans, and their journey to find their place in a post-war Earth amongst Autobots, Decepticons, and humans breathes new life into an otherwise stagnant franchise. The story it tells is full of heart, so much love poured into it by the cast and crew of the show, and it's genuinely why I believe Transformers EarthSpark may very well be the best show in the entire franchise. Hello everyone, I'm all about Sonic the Telltale Gamer, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into this phenomenal show and review the entirety of Transformers EarthSpark Season 1. We're going to break this up into a few categories. Unlike my episode reviews where I covered every episode one by one in very detailed reviews, this will be more so a review of the entire season. I'll be going over each third of the season, talking about what the general plot of each is, while also giving my brief thoughts on what my two favorite episodes are of each third. When the need arises, I'll be going into deep dives on the show's many characters as well, along with behind-the-scenes stuff like music, character designs, production notes, and even deleted scenes and storylines. So, without further ado, let's dive properly into my review of the entirety of Transformers EarthSpark Season 1. So let's start with the basics. What is Transformers EarthSpark, who made it, and how did it come to be? EarthSpark is the, at the time of this video's release, most recent iteration of the Transformers franchise. It was announced to be in development back in February of 2021, before having its title revealed a year later. The story revolves around a brand new species of Transformers called Terrans, which are essentially a hybrid of Transformers that are created when using human DNA. These Terrans end up learning their place in the world amongst other Autobots, Decepticons, and humans as they live with the Malto family. Each episode usually revolves around these Terrans learning a new life lesson, ranging from stuff such as how important rules can be in a household even if you don't agree with them, to deep-hitting stuff like gender identity and recovering from traumatic events. EarthSpark makes for many firsts in the Transformers franchise. To start, it's the first ever Transformers show to not be developed by Cartoon Network or Hasbro directly. For reference, for the past nearly 25 years, every Transformers show has usually been produced by Cartoon Network and aired on that channel, or on one of Hasbro's own channels like The Hub or Discovery Family. For reference, Beast Wars, RID 2001, the Unicron Trilogy, Animated, RID 15, and Cyberverse all aired on Cartoon Network. Meanwhile, reruns of G1 and Animated, as well as the entirety of Prime, Rescue Bots, and Rescue Bots Academy, aired on the Hub and Discovery Family. For EarthSpark, however, the show was produced by, for the first time ever, Nickelodeon, airing exclusively on Paramount Plus. Later though, reruns of EarthSpark would be broadcast on Nickelodeon after a few months. As such, many of the creative heads of EarthSpark are alumni of other Nick shows. The show's two creators and directors are Ant Ward and Dale Malinowski, who you may recognize as the creators of Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I personally only watched the first 3 episodes of that show back when it first came out, but with how many people who worked on EarthSpark ended up getting started on that show, I really want to go back and check out that show in full at some point. They're not the only TMNT alumni on here though. That also applies to the show's executive producers, one of which being Ciro Nieli. You might know him as a showrunner and director of the 2012 incarnation of the Ninja Turtles, which also happens to be my favorite version of them. And honestly, Ciro Nieli's influence shows in EarthSpark. The show's focus on 3D animation immediately reminded of how fluid the 2012 TMNT series was. Not to mention also how, despite how cute and round the character designs are, the show isn't afraid of tackling really dark subject matter at times. You may also recognize Ciro Nieli for being the creator of another one of my favorite cartoons back in the early 2000s, Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, a parody of many Sentai shows over in Japan. Their very anime-esque style isn't as apparent in EarthSpark as it was in the 2012 TMNT series, but I still felt a bit of it while watching the show. Some Transformers alumni also returned to develop EarthSpark. That's seen most in fellow executive producer Nicole Dubuck, who you'll probably recognize as the creator of Transformers Rescue Bots and one of the biggest writers for Prime, RID 15, and Rescue Bots Academy. She also voices Skywarp and Novastorm in this show. EarthSpark's head story editor is also none other than May Katz, who wrote some of the best episodes of Transformers Cyberverse and a few in Netflix's War for Cybertron Kingdom series. They personally wrote some of my favorite episodes of the show, such as episode 13 Missed Connection and episode 21 What Dwells Within. Rounding out the biggest names of creatives on EarthSpark's crew is their character designer, Nick Roche. Before EarthSpark, he previously worked as an artist and writer for the IDW comics. You may recognize him most for being the writer and artist of the infamous Wreckers comics, as well as some other miniseries in the IDW continuity like Spotlight Hot Rod, Spotlight Cup, Spotlight Megatron, Maximum Dinobots, and the grand finale to IDW's comics, Last Bot Standing. Nick Roche personally created a lot of the characters in the show design-wise, who I'll be discussing periodically throughout this review. But anyway, that's pretty much it in terms of the biggest contributors to what made EarthSpark unique. Let's go ahead now and talk about the actual show, starting with the first 10 episodes that were released roughly a year ago back in 2022.
No way! You're a Transformer!
Okay, we have to bring them home.
So to get things started with EarthSpark's plot, what is the story of EarthSpark? Well, to make a long story short, Transformers EarthSpark follows the story of two human kids, Robby and Malto. They're two young African-American Filipino children who moved from their lifelong home of Philadelphia to the much rural town of Witwicky, Pennsylvania. And yes, this is intentionally a reference to the name of Spike, Sparkplug, and Daniel Witwicky from G1, IDW, and Skybound's continuities, as well as Sam Witwicky from the Bayverse movies. This is due to the fact that their mother, Dot, who was a veteran of the Transformers War, seemingly got a new job as a park ranger there. Meanwhile, their father, Alex, is a college professor who teaches Cybertronian history. While away from home one night, Robby and Mo stumble across a cave containing an ancient Cybertronian artifact called the Emberstone. With it, they accidentally create Twitch and Thrash, the very first Earthborn Transformers who later become to be known as Terrans. In addition, Robby and Mo have special Cybertronian gloves grafted onto their bodies, which they end up calling Cyber Sleeves. These sleeves allow Robby and Mo to be emotionally linked to Twitch and Thrash, being able to understand exactly what they're feeling at any given time. The same goes for the Terrans, who can also sense their human siblings' thoughts and emotions. After a few misadventures, Twitch and Thrash become officially adopted by the Maltos, and begin training with Robby and Mo under the watch of Bumblebee to learn how to be true Transformers. With the exception of the two-part finale of this batch, Age of Evolution, episodes 3 through 8 are pretty much just standalone episodic stories about each of the Maltos learning important life lessons in fun and exciting ways. This formula may worry some more hardcore Transformers fans who may be more used to shows constantly progressing in a more serialized plot, with every episode in the vein of series such as Prime or the IDW and Skybound comics, but with EarthSpark, I genuinely believe this style, for the most part, works very well. EarthSpark's story on the tin sounds like a generic kid's story, sure. We've all watched our share of stuff like Blue's Clues, Rescue Bots, My Little Pony, you name it. But EarthSpark doesn't ever dumb down its lessons to children like many of these other shows do. Maybe part of that is the show's Y7 rating as opposed to the Y rating most others have, but regardless, EarthSpark carries a lot of good messages throughout its first season that I love, especially in this first batch. Stuff like showing parents that there's no one right way to raise every child, take time to care about what others in your family love even if you find them lame or weird, or not to neglect your siblings for clout among your peers, or just some of the many lessons that EarthSpark teaches its audience. Stuff not only for kids and young teenagers, but even lessons that even adults could stand to learn. Take this from me, a 26-year-old. While not every lesson this show teaches necessarily applies to me, many of them are those I wish shows taught me back when I was still a child. From when I was about 7 to 13, as a 90s kid, I grew up on stuff like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Danny Phantom, Fairly Odd Parents, Total Drama, Ben 10, the 2003 and 2012 Ninja Turtles shows, and so on. And while yeah, I'll be forever grateful I had to grow up with those shows over stuff like, this, I can't say the majority of those shows were as emotionally deep. Sure, stuff in the early 2010s were like Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, and so on, but I was 14 by then. All my other friends were into real shows like The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, and Riverdale. I never really had a chance to get into those other cartoons as a result. Compare that to shows many kids growing up since 2015 have gotten. Craig of the Creek, Steven Universe, Amphibia, The Owl House, and so on. Transformers EarthSpark tackles so many messages throughout these 10 episodes that allow it to sit right alongside these other great shows we've gotten in the past almost 10 years. And these messages only get across to the audience so well thanks to the show's incredible main cast. Enter the Maltos.
These Terrans deserve to learn about both of their worlds. And I can think of no better human protectors than you and your family.
The Maltos are such a fun, unique breath of air when it comes to human characters in the Transformers franchise. In fact, I'd go out on a limb and say these are without a doubt the best main humans we've seen in the Transformers cartoon ever. Sure, I know there's many fans who much so still prefer Sorry from Animated or maybe Jack Raff or Miko from Prime 2, but in comparison to them, the Maltos give us something no other Transformers show really has done before. Truly make the human cast feel like a family. Yeah, we had Spike and Sparkplug back in G1, but did you ever really see them really act like a father and son together? And yeah, June was decently involved in Prime with her son Jack, even getting a hilarious solo episode with Fowler, and had a fantastic performance done by the late Marky Post, but she wasn't a main human like her son Raph or Miko were. Not to mention how Raph or Miko's parents weren't even really involved in Prime's story. In EarthSpark, Robby and Mo's parents feel just as important to the show story as they do, and that is a very refreshing change of pace to me. I know there's people out there who may enjoy other humans in the series, take for example Verity Carlo from the IDW comics, Charlie or Noah from the more recent Transformers movies, or even the new versions of Spike and Carly in Skybound's Transformers comics. But in terms of actual cartoon humans, the Maltos take the cake for that in my opinion.
But that's just it, Mom. With my cyber shield, I could keep everyone safe.
So to start with the Maltos, let's begin with the oldest son and mostly audience surrogate character, Robby. He's, for the most part, your standard children's show protagonist. A brash, sort of dramatic 13-year-old who feels like his parents just don't understand him. He's upset that he and Mo had to leave all their friends and old life behind in Philadelphia to move to Witwicky. I can't say I know what it's like to go through such an experience, sadly, though. For the past 25 years of my life, my family has never once moved. The closest I could say I had to that experience was perhaps me moving away to college. Living in New Jersey for all my life, then going to Pennsylvania for 4 years on and off was a shake-up, sure, and it sucked being apart from my family like that. But like Robby, I too settled into my campus and ended up having a great time. While Robby starts the series off rather bratty and rebellious, not unlike that of Miko and Sari of past shows, he really matures throughout the series. The dangers and adventures he goes on with his new Terran siblings shows him humility, how important it is to be part of a family, and to really be a protector to all of his younger siblings. It's very fitting because of this when, in the end of the season, Robby ends up getting the ability to create a giant shield from his cyber sleeve, now making him his family's literal protector. Robby's brought to life masterfully by Sydney Michaela, who was just around 18 and 19 years old when the show started. Prior to EarthSpark, Michaela has done other children's shows such as Wolf and the Netflix series Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts. While having female voice actors play male characters in cartoons is no new concept, sometimes it's hard to take characters seriously as a result. Sydney Michaela, though, manages to portray Robby perfectly. Never once did I doubt that he felt any more or less mature than a 13-year-old boy would thanks to her voice acting. Robby is the yin to his little sister Mo's yang. He's far more outspoken, all about trying to be cool, and usually thinks he knows better than others like most teenagers around his age do. I see a lot of myself in Robby back when I was 13, most of this coming from his plot in episode 6, Traditions. In this episode, his father Alex wants him to accompany him on an annual tradition that Robby himself finds rather cringe nowadays. He's much more focused in his own personal endeavors, like playing in an online gaming tournament. As kids, I'm sure we've all had moments where stuff we used to do with our parents just sort of annoyed us as we got older. Despite that though, these moments mean a lot to our parents, and as Robby comes to learn by the end of the episode, life isn't about doing just what you enjoy, but what those you love do as well. Overall, Robby does act annoying at times, but what 13-year-old hasn't? He's a very well done child character for the Transformers franchise, but not the best EarthSpark has to offer in my opinion.
I need you all to know, touching the Emberstone and getting to be your sister is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
That title goes to his little sister Morgan, aka Mo Malto. Mo is without a doubt not only the better half of the Malto children, but tied with her mother Dot as the best human Malto in general. Mo is only 9 years old compared to Robby. As such, she's often looked down upon by the rest of her human family and other characters because of how young she is. Despite nearly everyone else underestimating her though, she's arguably the most emotionally mature child character in the show between her brother and Terran siblings. Many times throughout EarthSpark, Mo really connects with the other Terrans and helps them understand their feelings in intense situations. She serves as sort of the unofficial moral compass of the Maltos at times, always wanting what's best for her family while also doing it the right way when possible. In this way, Mo almost reminds me of another famous 9-year-old girl in a different favorite series of mine. That, of course, would be Clementine from Telltale's The Walking Dead series. While she's nearly 18 by the end of Season 4, I'm mostly referring to Clem as she was portrayed in the very first game in Season 1, which is now over 10 years old? Jesus Christ, I was 14 back then. Like Mo, Clem acted as primarily the moral compass to Lee for the majority of Season 1 of The Walking Dead. She was the child character wise beyond her years, wanting everyone in her group to get along. Mo is essentially the Clementine of EarthSpark. She just wants everyone to get along more than anything, even if that takes a momentous amount of effort. She wants to fight tooth and nail for her family to be happy and safe. It's fitting then that later on in the series, her cyber sleeve weapon is a literal sword. You know, to fight with. Mo's performance is very well done by the incredibly talented Xeon Broadnax. For being only roughly 10 years old when she recorded Mo for this season, and being her first major acting role in no less, she killed it. Aside from voicing Mo, Xeon Broadnax's acting most notable credits include Jamie Foxx's daughter in a vampire movie and a character in Starfield? What the fuck? The best part of Mo's character, though, has got to be her relationship with her two Terran brothers, Thrash and Jawbreaker. Oh, did I say Jawbreaker? We'll get back to him later. Mo's relationship with Thrash is easily the best human-Terran relationship in the series. Until we get later to this season, anyway. I don't want to get into it too much right now and save some of it for Thrash's section of this video later, but long story short, Mo and Thrash really act like a brother-sister duo. They feel so natural with each other, and I love that. Mo and Robby's relationship is good too, but something about how Mo interacts with Thrash just hits different to me. It's almost to me like a more personal version of Charlie and Bumblebee's relationship in the Bumblebee movie. Charlie and Beast's relationship in that movie was really heartwarming, don't get me wrong. The same goes with Noah and Mirage in Rise of the Beast. But EarthSpark's overall longer runtime made me find myself caring for Mo and Thrash even more so. I just wish that overall, we got to see them interact more together. Robby and Twitch get far more screen time together this season in my opinion, and while that's totally great for them, I just wish Mo and Thrash had an equal amount. Robby and Mo aren't the only important humans in EarthSpark's main cast, however. This time around, the kids' parents get some time in on the spotlight too. As I mentioned earlier, Dot and Alex are both easily the best parent characters we've had in the whole Transformers franchise, and that's for two reasons. First, they actually are proper characters that have their own wants and needs other than just being protective of their kids from the giant scary robots. Second, they're made to be just as important to the story of EarthSpark as their kids. Let's start with Dorothy, aka Dot, for instance.
I respect your concern for Twitch and Thrash, but these bots are bonded to my children.
Dot Malto can argue to be essentially the catalyst for EarthSpark's story. Prior to the events of the show, she served in the US Army, eventually becoming one of Ghost's highest lieutenants when the Transformers War started on Earth. Towards the end of the war, in a battle we find out later in the season to be called the Battle of the Bay, Dot was caught in an Autobot friendly fire incident that made her lose her right leg from the knee down. This did little to impede her capabilities as a soldier though, even less so as a mother. Many times throughout the show, we see Dot very capable of handling herself in combat situations, proving to be just as effective in a fight as the Autobots she fights alongside. It's also refreshing for once to have her and her husband Alex actually be aware of Transformers' existences from the start of this series. In my opinion, many shows and other continuities in the Transformers franchise suffer when the human characters have to constantly be introduced to the Autobots and Decepticons. With EarthSpark, the fact that the Transformers are essentially general knowledge to the public allows the show to hit the ground running, so to speak. It also gives Dot the ability to have really interesting relationships with the main cast of Transformers in the show. While she serves as a great mother to her Terran children, especially with Twitch later on in the series, I think it goes without saying her best relationship in the series is with Megatron. Yes, that's right, Megatron. After all, in the lore of EarthSpark, Dot is actually the one who convinced Megatron to become an Autobot. As Megatron reveals to the Malto children later on this season, the reason why he decided to abandon the Decepticon cause is because of just how dedicated Dot was to not only saving Autobot and human lives, but Decepticons as well. Dot and Megatron have a lot of fun banter and exchanges throughout the season, which I'll be explaining more later on in this video.
My grandfather taught me everything carries a story. He's why I love history.
Rounding out our main cast of humans is the patriarch of the Malto family, the lovable Alex. Like many children's cartoons, Alex is pretty much your usual funny dad character to bounce off the more serious mother. Unlike other depictions of this character archetype though, Alex can still have his own moments of sincerity and acting as a truly good father figure to his children. Being a college professor who is obsessed with Transformers history, Alex is used often in EarthSpark to lore dump to the audience when needed, catching them up on all the larger mythos of the Transformers franchise. But just describing Alex as the Transformer expert who's also a Bumblebee fanboy would be such a gross simplification of his character. He's far more than that. As I mentioned earlier in this essay, the Maltos are an African-American Filipino family. When EarthSpark was first announced, quite a few toxic people took online to immediately slander the show when they saw the main human cast were people of color. But despite how much these people complain about EarthSpark going, woke, the show doubles down on this fact and portrays the Maltos' heritage in a very respectful and genuine way. This is mostly done through Alex's character. He is a Filipino man through and through, and many times throughout the show this is referenced through both character backstories and dialogue. Remember the traditions episode I mentioned earlier with Robby? That's where this is displayed the most. Alex is a central character of this episode, wanting his children to partake in an annual walk-walk hunt. For those who don't know, the walk-walk is essentially a mythological creature that's the Filipino equivalent to a vampire. Later on in the episode, when Alex takes Bumblebee on the hunt when his kids don't want to, he even uses accurate Filipino slang when telling Bee about how much his grandfather, or Lolo, inspired him to study history. Alex's voice actor John Briones is also a Filipino man, and with his voice acting, you can absolutely tell he had a blast recording his lines this season. Also, fun fact, John also has a teenage son named Teo Briones who is also an actor. For horror fans, you might recognize him as having played Junior Wheeler back in the first season of the Chucky television series, which I highly recommend my older audience goes check out if you'd like. He even got to go to the premiere of EarthSpark with his father, where, of course, his favorite character is Bumblebee. Like father, like son, huh? What I think my favorite part of Alex's character is, though, is despite his body shape, Alex proves to be just as capable in a fight as his wife and kids are. Now, in most shows, you'd expect the, larger characters to essentially be the comic relief in a fight scene. Maybe they spend the whole fight running away from someone or end up accidentally winning by crushing or pinning someone under them. EarthSpark could have easily fallen into this trap so many other children's cartoons do, but it doesn't. True to his Filipino heritage, Alex can be very proficient in the art of arnis. Arnis is an actual martial art that originated from the Philippines, where fighters utilize wooden sticks or short swords as a means of self-defense. These sticks are often usually referred to as eskrima, or Kali sticks, and essentially act like batons in a fight. You might recognize him as having dominated the Call of Duty Warzone scene about 3 years ago because of how absolutely OP they were. But that's beside the point. The EarthSpark team did a great job of deciding to not only give Alex combat prowess on roughly the same level as the rest of his family, but also tie his fighting style directly into his character's background. We even see later on in this episode that he at least taught Robby, and probably Mo as well, quite a bit of arnis too. Enough for the two of them together to take down a few of Mandroid's arachnamechs all on their own without any Autobots or Terrans to assist them. Each of the human Maltos has a very distinct role in EarthSpark, with none of them at all feeling like a waste of space. The reluctant hero, the heart of the family, the devoted protector, and the wise teacher. EarthSpark makes every Malto have their own voice and character, and cements them as probably the best human cast we've ever had for a Transformers series. But Robby, Mo, Dot, and Alex aren't the entirety of the Malto family. Let's go ahead and talk about the two newest members of the family and arguably the true main characters of EarthSpark, the Terrans.
A new species, entirely from this planet. You are Cybertronus Terrans.
While the human Maltos make for a fantastic cast of characters, Transformers EarthSpark wouldn't really be a Transformers show without, well, Transformers. Enter the Terrans, a brand new subspecies of Transformers that are uniquely defined by being sorta Cybertronian human hybrids. They are primarily Cybertronians like most Autobots and Decepticons, but their genetics are partially consistent of human DNA as well. While we don't have the technical explanation for what differentiates Terrans from other Cybertronians, we can sorta infer what makes them special. Terrans, or Cybertronus Terran as Mandroid first calls them, do not run off energon like other Cybertronians. While we see in episode 7 Friends and Family that at the very least Terrans can absorb energon, it's not the primary fuel source for them. Instead, they appear to run off a special kind of water that seems to have been affected in a way by the Emberstone. In addition, the Terrans' designs I'd argue have far more of an organic look to their bodies than their Cybertronian cousins. Notice how characters like Optimus, Bumblebee, and Swindle have your traditional blocky kibble in proportions. In comparison, the Terrans truly look more humanoid and less, boxy. This is extremely apparent in their protoform designs especially. If I had seen these designs for the first time and I didn't know they were from a Transformers show, I'd say there's some other children's show with human-like aliens. Anyway, the reasoning for Terrans having these differences from Cybertronians is their origin. Instead of being created by quintessence or a hot spring / well of sparks, the Terrans seem to get their human DNA from whoever touches the Emberstone, a Cybertronian artifact with the power to create life. Created by Quintus Prime in this continuity, the Emberstone already has Cybertronian DNA in it courtesy of Quintus Prime. So all of it needs to create life is just DNA from another species, hence why when Robby and Mo touch it, it gives birth to Twitch and Thrash. And since the Terrans are formed with the Maltos DNA, that technically makes them their siblings in that regard. It could also explain why the Terrans need water to survive. We as humans do, so why wouldn't Transformers that are pretty much 50% human need it as well? Personally, I'm both a big fan of this idea of human / Transformers hybrids, and also surprised it took us this long to get such a concept. Sure, we've had Transformers born on Earth in the past, most notably at the end of the IW comics, but those still ran on energon and were created just like most other Cybertronians. We've also had human-made Transformers like Nightbird in the G1 cartoon, or Galvatron and Stinger in Age of Extinction, but again, there's nothing really separating them from normal Cybertronians like the Terrans do. Well, I guess Age of Extinction did do something unique by having Galvatron and Stinger be made of, Transformium? That is such a stupid name. But we're getting off track here. For most of these first 10 episodes of EarthSpark, we follow two new Terrans, Twitch and Thrash. I always like Transformer shows that focus on younger or newborn Transformers. It's a lot of the reason why I actually really enjoyed Robots in Disguise 2015. Back in that show, Sideswipe and Stronum were clearly written in mind to essentially be young adults / teenagers. They were raised on a post-war Cybertron, never really having to deal with millennia of war and loss like other legacy characters like Optimus and Bumblebee had to endure. Seeing them navigate situations and problems on Earth as part of Bumblebee's team and learning to function as a cohesive unit was really satisfying to watch. EarthSpark though cranks that up to 11 with Twitch and Thrash. Not only are they essentially newborn Transformers, they don't even know how to be Transformers. As such, these first 10 episodes are really about showing these two characters what their kind is really like, and learning from other Autobots, Decepticons, and the rest of their family to discover who they want to be. We get to see stuff like Twitch and Thrash struggling to learn how to transform on command, choosing an alt mode that they feel comfortable with, and other things that no other Transformers show has really tackled before. The closest thing I can think of that came to this was back in the IW2 comics, which ran from 2019 to 2022. In the first 5 issues of the comic, Bumblebee had an apprentice named Rubble, a newborn Transformer who, along with the help of Windblade, tried his best to teach Rubble about life as a Cybertronian. Rubble may as well have been the blueprint for Twitch and Thrash, who are taught by this continuity's version of Bumblebee to unlock their full potential as Transformers. If I had to say which of the 2 Terrans develops the most in this show, that for sure would be Twitch.
We've had so many close calls, and I don't know what I would do if I lost any of you on my watch.
For the most part, you could argue Twitch is the true main character of EarthSpark. Yeah, the show does have an ensemble cast, but in terms of characters actually growing, there's no one who grows as much as Twitch. As the firstborn Terran, Twitch sort of acts as the audience surrogate for most of EarthSpark's audience. Thrash and the other Terrans are relatable too, but Twitch gets far more focused than the others. Twitch starts off the first batch of episodes very analytical. She takes everything at face value essentially, and nearly always needs clarification from her human siblings. As the series goes on though, Twitch starts to properly develop, just like real people do. She gets her own personality, she has her own wants and needs different from the rest of her family, and she even has her own unique flaws. This all builds towards later in the series where Twitch becomes the leader of the Malto children. This happens more so in the second and third batches of episodes though, so we'll come back to that later. I also don't want to have a whole essay on Twitch inside this already long entire season essay, so I'll try to summarize her traits to the best of my ability here. She always tries to see the best in people and, like her sister Mo, often wants her whole family to get along. This can come off though as a bit overbearing and controlling sometimes. Twitch has a bad habit of wanting to make sure everything goes perfectly, or at least her definition of perfect. She's so scared of failure, a trait I identify with immensely. This is best shown in 2 specific episodes in the second batch of EarthSpark. Episode 14, Security Protocols, and Episode 15, Bare Necessities. In Security Protocols, Twitch is very focused on making sure she and the rest of her siblings are always training, even going as far as to pick a fight with Thrash to make sure he's ready for anything. Later on in the episode, Twitch explains that she's terrified of failing or not being ready for a situation. If she or her family aren't prepared enough, someone could get hurt or die or just otherwise ruin the full family dynamic. This then bleeds into Bare Necessities, where Twitch panics over not having a Mother's Day gift for Dot. Robby tries to reassure Twitch that it's not a big deal what she gets her, but Twitch refutes that she wants Mother's Day to, you guessed it, be perfect for Dot, scared that her relationship with her mother will sour otherwise. All of Twitch's emotions are perfectly portrayed by her voice actress Catherine Gavari. She's no stranger to voicing hopeful young girls either in animation. You might already recognize her as voice of Kamala Khan, aka Ms. Marvel, in many animated Marvel projects. She even voiced Kamala back in Crystal Dynamics Avengers game a few years ago. I don't think that could really spell it out any better. Twitch is pretty much the Kamala Khan of EarthSpark. Hey, Autobots Sonic in the future here. I just double-checked my notes, and it turns out Catherine Kavari did not voice Kamala in the Crystal Dynamics Avengers game. That was actually Sandra Saad, so my bad for making that little error. From a design standpoint, Twitch's bright red paint job is very distinct, and helps to keep her visually unique from her siblings. I also love how she utilizes her wings in drone mode as swords when in bot mode. It brings to mind a combat style that only reminds me of Windblade. Like Windblade, Twitch is a very skilled sword fighter, but also has a slew of other attacks at her disposal. Being that her ult mode is a drone created by Wheeljack, she has many of their abilities as well, like an EMP ray and an energy shield that project around her for defense. Twitch is a fantastic leading Terran, but thankfully, she's got an equally fantastic brother to bounce off of.
Cybertronians are people, and we're the ones saving Earth tonight.
Thrash is without a doubt one of my 2 favorite Terrans. He's cool, free-thinking, never lets anyone tell him what he can and can't do. Essentially your stereotypical rebellious child in children's shows. But Thrash truly has a heart of gold. He doesn't rebel just because, or he's your usual angsty teen. Thrash just wants to be treated fairly and have his fellow Terrans treated fairly as well. 3 episodes specifically show this the best, but I think for now we'll talk about the one in the first batch with episode 4, House Rules. In this episode, Twitch and Thrash play a little too hard and end up going through the kitchen window of the Malto house during a game of Capture the Flag. Dot then calls for a house meeting, where she explains that to prevent further damages to the house, the Terrans are no longer allowed inside the house. Twitch seems to be fine with this rule, but Thrash is annoyed by it, irritated by the fact that his human siblings get special treatment. Mo tries to initially cheer up Thrash by spending the whole day outside with him, but Thrash instead tries to get around the rules with technicalities. This goes about as well as you'd expect. What starts out as the 2 of them watching wrestling together soon turns to Thrash crashing out the window with Mo, good lord. Thankfully though, neither of them are injured, but of course, Dots ends up grounding them both. Further on in the episode, Thrash convinces Mo to sneak out to mess around in Witwicky, claiming that Dot never exactly clarified where the 2 of them could be grounded. They end up running into Swindle, who just previously raided a ghost convoy with an energon scanner so that he could try and locate where his brother Hardtop was being held. Swindle tricks the young Maltos, taking them on all kinds of fun trips, proclaiming that his brother was abducted and needs their help to free him. They both agree and offer to take Swindle back to their home and get Dot to help him out, not realizing he's playing them both. That's when B attacks, thinking Swindle's up to his old tricks, but plays Boy Who Cried Wolf and runs away the second he gets hurt. After he runs away, Dot chastises Thrash and Mo for sneaking out and hanging out with Decepticons, citing how dangerous they are. Mo at first tries to rebuke this by bringing up how she's good friends with Megatron, but then Dot counters by saying that Megatron is the exception, since he was willing to become an Autobot. This time though, it's Thrash who speaks up, who gives an actually really fair argument. Megatron was only able to change because Dot gave him the chance to, a chance B and Dot did not give Swindle. Granted, we as the audience know Swindle's up to no good, but to everyone else, I truly believe Thrash is right here. He then blows up on Dot and B, claiming that he deserves a chance as well, a chance without any rules to stop him from being who he truly is. He goes to sulk in a tent Mo made for him earlier in the episode, where Mo asks what's been going on with Thrash. True to his character, he thinks it's not fair at all how Dot is okay with breaking the rules by hiding him and Twitch from Ghost, and Optimus does the same with B, but yet he and Mo can't be allowed to go and help Swindle, a double standard which to Thrash is unacceptable. This scene works so well thanks to the incredible voice talent of Thrash's VA, Zeno Robinson. I have been a huge fan of his work as primarily an anime voice actor in the past, which you probably recognize him from mostly as the voices of Hawks in My Hero Academia, Genya in Demon Slayer, and on Yankapon in Attack on Titan. But in case you're not a total weeb like I am, he's got a fair share of traditional cartoon credits as well, most notably Hunter from the Owl House. My prior experience with Zeno Robinson credits, though, mostly stemmed from his work in anime, so with Thrash, I truly imagined his voice as sort of a younger, more immature version of his voice as Hawks. It's also in this scene where we get what is arguably my favorite line Thrash says in the entire show.
If you were missing, I'd break every rule in the world to get you back. I can't stay with a family that won't help someone just because they don't like how they look.
Zeno Robinson is at his best as Thrash whenever he's acting opposite of Xeon Broadnax's Mo. From what I've heard, the entirety of Season 1 had all of their VAs record their lines separately, but to me, Thrash and Mo's connection throughout the show makes that very hard to believe. They truly feel the most like siblings out of any of the Maltos and EarthSpark save for Robby and Mo together. Robby and Twitch have a fun brother-sister dynamic at times, but I just didn't feel that real sibling connection like I do with Mo and Thrash. Multiple times throughout the season, the two of them have a lot of deep conversations together, and really allow Thrash to be vulnerable when he otherwise doesn't feel comfortable doing so. It's because of this reason primarily why Thrash is my favorite Terran. I just wish EarthSpark as a show loved him as much as I do. Sadly, Thrash seems to get so little spotlight in the show compared to the other Maltos, which is the first con I have with the show. Pretty much every character in EarthSpark gets a fair amount of screen time and whole episodes show off as the main character, so to speak. Twitch, for instance, gets arguably 11 episodes in Season 1 as a main character. These being episodes 3, 5, 6, 10, 11, 14, 15, 18, 24, 25, and 26. How many do I feel Thrash gets to be a main character in? 7! Those being episodes 2, 4, 14, 16, 22, 24, and 26. And most of those have him sharing a spotlight with other characters. So if we only count episodes where mostly Thrash is the main character, that brings us to a whopping 4 episodes. That being episodes 4, 16, 24, and 26. If we did the same with Twitch, that would give her 7, due to her being the primary protagonist in episodes 3, 5, 6, 11, 15, 25, and 26. Thrash was hyped up to EarthSpark's release prior as being essentially the co-lead of the show alongside his sister Twitch. And I get it, since Twitch is the leader of Terrans, of course she'd have more focus than Thrash. But even compared to the other main characters in the show, Thrash has far less spotlight than them. We'll get to those characters later on in this video, but in short, as a Thrash fan, it really hurts to see a character so hyped as a main character so often thrown to the sidelines in favor of other characters. Please, Nickelodeon, if you're listening, make Thrash more prominent in Season 2, I'm begging you! So now we've gone over the main Malto family members that round out most of EarthSpark's main cast, but of course, you can't have a Transformers show without your mainstay legacy characters. So let's go ahead and talk about the 3 of them that are introduced in this first 10 episode batch that are some of the best interpretations of these legacy characters ever.
Laugh, then cool pose. Oh, ha ha ha!
The first legacy character I want to touch on is one who I'd argue is the most important one, and our final main character introduced in this batch of episodes. That, of course, is Bumblebee. I can understand where some Transformers fans are coming from lately, feeling that there's been too much of Bee in the franchise lately, between the new live-action movies, RID-15, and Cyberverse, where some people might feel that Bee never really changed between any of these continuities. Hell, Bee fatigue has gotten so bad in the Skybound Transformers comics, the writer literally killed off Bumblebee in the first issue just because he didn't want him in the story. Fortunately, however, I can easily say EarthSpark Bumblebee is such a refreshingly new take on the character in comparison to the past decade of different versions of him. Now, that's not me saying that every version of Bumblebee over the past 10 years of the series has been bad. Not at all. RID-15 and both IEW incarnations of him were awesome, and Jeremy Levy's performance in Cyberverse made that be one of my favorites too. With EarthSpark Bumblebee though, he feels like the perfect evolution of the character from what we've seen him throughout the franchise's 40-year history. He's still got your tried and true Bumblebee backstory as the best scout the Autobots ever had, of course, but he's not immediately an immature, cocky hotshot like, let's say, Bayverse or Animated Bee. Just because it's been 15 years since the Transformers War ended as well, he's not automatically a wise, tired leader like RID-15B was either. Instead, EarthSpark Bumblebee acts as sort of a mix of both of these Bumblebees shoved into a blender, then seasoned with a dash of G1 or IEW Bumblebee on top. EarthSpark Bumblebee starts off the series very much so like Animated Bee, with a big chip on his shoulder. For some reason, that the show never reveals for some reason, I swear to God, please explain this in Season 2, Bumblebee has been hiding from G.H.O.S.T since the war ended, with Optimus having faked his death. He believes he's the absolute best at what he does, so he feels like mentoring a bunch of children with the Terrans and Maltos is beneath him. Over the course of these 10 episodes though, Bumblebee truly learns some humility and as a result gets more mature as well. He shifts properly into the mentor role Optimus taxes him with at the start of the series, honestly acting as a surrogate father or uncle of sorts to the Terrans. This is mostly apparent with Twitch. Out of all the Terrans, Twitch is the one Bumblebee seems to have the deepest bond with. I absolutely love their interactions together and how much Bee inspires confidence in her to help shape her into the leader of her Terran siblings. Anyway, EarthSpark Bumblebee feels like the perfect blend of nearly every previous incarnation that's come before him. That's only possible though due to the fantastic job as VA Danny Pudi does as Bumblebee. You'll probably recognize Pudi best as Abed in the sitcom Community, but he's also done voice work in the past, specifically as Huey in the 2017 reboot of DuckTales. Danny Pudi is a comedy actor first and foremost, and that shows with how he portrays Bumblebee for the most part. He's usually way in over his head with situations, always thinking he can handle what's thrown at him, and that's a bit of flaw to Bumblebee. He's a goofball at first and foremost, but he can be serious too when a situation calls for it. We see this more serious side of Bee a few times in the first 10 episodes, but that side is on full display in the second batch we'll be covering later. While Bee is arguably the most important legacy character in EarthSpark, there's two others that are just as great as him. It's very hard for a Transformers series, whether it be a show or comic, to stick to a story where Optimus and Megatron aren't involved, let alone the main characters. And yet, despite that, EarthSpark managed to do exactly that. Sort of. Yes, Optimus and Megatron aren't the focus of EarthSpark, as they should be, but they still quite play major roles in the show's story. The interesting thing here is though, out of both these iconic characters, it's actually Megatron I'd argue who has the larger presence in EarthSpark. But let's go and talk about Optimus first. EarthSpark Optimus is not a bad character at all, let me get that clear. I see quite a few people online that are very vocal of how this version of Optimus is dumb apparently. They don't like the fact that he isn't a super serious deadpan war veteran like Prime Optimus, or isn't just the main character in general. Guys, are we watching the same show here? EarthSpark Optimus is anything but dumb. Because he makes really bad jokes sometimes and doesn't sound depressed all the time, he's a bad Optimus? That couldn't be any more wrong. EarthSpark Optimus is more jovial than TFP Optimus, sure, but that's a good thing. And that's not saying TFP Optimus is a bad character either. Peter Cullen's performance in Prime as him is easily his best performance as that character in my opinion. EarthSpark Optimus, on the other side, makes jokes and is arguably more positive than many Optimuses before him, but he's still a leader of the Autobots for a reason. He can get serious when the need calls for it. He has a strong sense of justice and is a lawful good like most other versions of Optimus are. He's just a silly little dude on top of it, and it honestly makes him feel very similar to his G1 incarnation in that regards. Furthermore, it's so refreshing to have another VA for Optimus that isn't trying to impersonate Peter Cullen. Don't get me wrong, Jake Fushi was good as Optimus in Cyberverse, but I just wish he did his own version of Optimus. That's exactly what Alan Tudyk does with EarthSpark Optimus. His voice is just as commanding as Peter Cullen's, but it's also very reassuring at times too and makes him a character others can actually feel comfortable around. But let's talk about Megatron now. As I mentioned in Dot's section, EarthSpark Megs is an Autobot this time around, a first for a Transformers cartoon. It's also the first time in a while that he's had an alt mode that isn't a gun, tank, or Cybertronian aircraft. In EarthSpark, he transforms into a giant artillery helicopter instead, very similarly to how he did in Animated as well. While I'm a big fan of EarthSpark Optimus, I feel like Megatron easily steals the show between these two. He is such a stark contrast from any other Megatron before him. Granted, we've only had one Megatron before that actually turned good, but even then, EarthSpark goes a completely different route with him. For reference, let's compare him to Megatron in the IEW comics, specifically More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. In these comics, sure, Megatron is reformed, but he's rather gloomy and miserable about it. Granted, mostly everyone in the comics still hate him for all he did prior in the comics, as they should, but throughout the comics run, Megatron never really gets himself out of this mopey, I'm the bad guy, I don't deserve redemption attitude. Granted, IW Megatron does crack a few jokes and can be lighthearted at times, but they're mostly him being unintentionally funny, or are too few and far between to really feel significant. Meanwhile, with EarthSpark Megatron, he doesn't let what he did in the past get him down. He still regrets his actions as leader of Decepticons, of course, but he doesn't let those guilty thoughts weigh him down most of the time. He has a good, healthy relationship with Dot akin to those formed by war veterans, and he doesn't hate working alongside Optimus, Alita, and the other Autobots. Sure, he has problems with working for G.H.O.S.T, but those stem from not trusting the organization, not because he hates humans. And EarthSpark Megatron is incredibly funny, which is a very nice surprise when you realize his voice actor was Rory McCann, best known as the Hound from Game of Thrones. It's crazy how vastly different both these characters are, and yet at the same time, quite similar. Like seriously, minus all the swearing, you can't tell me that Megatron wouldn't at least say some of this stuff the Hound does in Game of Thrones.
There's a price on your head.
Yes, that's what the king does when you tell me to f*** off. First you named your sword.
Lots of people name their swords.
Lots of
Just like with Optimus 2, I love how Rory McCann isn't just trying to make a Frank Welker impression. EarthSpark Megatron has its own unique voice, and it's actually incredible that it works so well. Rory McCann is quite the seasoned actor, sure, but this is his actual first proper voice acting credit his entire career, and he knocked it out of the park. He's got so many good lines throughout this entire show, too.
By all means, resist. It's my favorite part. Curse that annoyingly catchy tune. Deception, Prime. Consider me impressed.
Optimus and Megatron aren't the main focus of Transformers EarthSpark, but it'd be an understatement to say they're not important at all. Both of these iconic figures offer so many important lessons to the Terrans, and the great content they bring to the show is not something to be overlooked. To shed more light on why I believe Optimus and Megatron's EarthSpark incarnations are among their best, here are thoughts by my friends, fellow YouTuber, and personal inspiration, Comodin Cam, on how he enjoys Optimus and Megatron alongside other legacy characters in EarthSpark.
Transformers EarthSpark to me, much like previous Transformers shows, has a huge potential here to be so much bigger and better than what we got in Season 1. While I did enjoy the season overall, I felt like there was so much more that they could have dived deeper into. Now I understand the main focus of this first season was introducing us to all of the Terran characters, which they've done really well. And I feel like that bond, that kind of understanding of all the characters' friendships has been established now, so there's really no need to really hold back on the legacy characters going into the future seasons. Like, where would the harm be in just having an episode where it just focuses on Optimus Prime and Megatron, or an episode where it's just about RC and Wheeljack, just sort of standalone episodes that we don't have to worry about the Terran characters or the human characters. You know, legacy characters, like they have been doing for over 40 years, have been holding stories on their own. And they have a golden opportunity now, as they have legacy characters in situations we've never ever seen before in cartoon media, like Megatron is now an Autobot. And it isn't a temporary thing either, he's an Autobot throughout the whole show. And while he is one of my favourite characters in the show, he has yet to be the best character in the show, because there has not been much yet to really explore or dive deep into. It feels like so far with the Megatron character, they've just given us breadcrumbs, which, you know, for Season 1, it's understandable, you know, but that doesn't mean they have no excuse now to go a little bit further with the character in Season 2. You know, seeing how he faced off Soundwave, and Soundwave calling him a traitor, there's so much more you can do with that.
Big thanks to him and the other YouTubers and members of the Transformers community who offered to provide commentary for my video. You'll be hearing from a few others by the end of this essay, and I hope you enjoy what they have to say as well. Before we go on to the last few key figures in Season 1A of EarthSpark though, I want to take a moment to gush about one of my favorite parts of the show. Besides the characters and the art style, a place where I think EarthSpark really shines is in the music.
Thrash just discovered music, and I should probably coach him through this.
In my opinion, Transformers EarthSpark is one of the most unique soundtracks a Transformers show has ever had. G1 had your typical cheesy 80s cartoon music for the time, the Unicron trilogy had a lot of guitar riffs, and no one could ever forget the epic orchestral music Beast Wars and Prime got. Prime especially was, and still is, revered by how well it captured the epic feel of the Bayverse movies. People like to diss on those movies all the time, but no one can deny just how impactful Steve Jablonsky's scores were on those films. Brian Tyler did a fantastic job of capturing that feeling and translating it to Prime's soundtrack. With EarthSpark though, once again, the show breaks the mold and goes for something new and fresh, and it pays off big time. EarthSpark's soundtrack was composed by Crush Effect, a music production duo from South California who specialize in making all kinds of genres of music. With EarthSpark, they really went ahead and tried to cater to Transformers' roots as an 80s cartoon, but adding a new, almost ethereal flair to it. Many of the show's songs have a mix of both synthwave and various other electronic instruments that Crush Effect manages to mix together in so many ways, no single piece of music overstays its welcome. Along with that, Crush Effect also really likes to give each character or group of characters their own sort of theme song in the soundtrack. Whether it be a certain musical riff or instrument used in the background when that character is the spotlight of a scene, it's instantly apparent when a certain character is based on their music. Take for example this song here from the official Season 1 soundtrack called The Cave. This is pretty much the Terrans theme song. That large synth horn you hear as the music swells, that's pretty much the signature note of the Terrans theme. It's all synthy to represent how the Terrans are robotic in nature, with a mix of other instruments involved to making the song have an almost ethereal feel to it, like they're new and organic. It helps separate them from other Autobots like Optimus and Alita, whose music has more of a triumphant, blatant use of the synth horn. Optimus and Alita are regarded as some of the most iconic heroes in the EarthSpark universe, and their theme doubles down on that fact. Every character has their own theme and sound. I would love to go over every single one, but I think that I'll add almost another hour to this video, so I'm just going to spend my time talking about my favorite single song on the EarthSpark soundtrack with this batch of episodes. That one would easily have to be Megatron's theme, or as the official soundtrack calls it, Something Happened. The heavy funk music literally sounds powerful, intense, everything Megatron should be. It honestly sounds like music you would hear during a boss battle in Cyberpunk 2077, and I love it for that reason. Every time you hear this theme in this show, it gets you so pumped because you just know Megatron is going to smash some heads. Only this time, you actually get to root for him since he's an Autobot for this time around. This song is just so good. So we've covered essentially the main cast of EarthSpark now for the most part. Up next in terms of characters, we can discuss other key players in the story. The bad guys. This time though, with Megatron as an Autobot, the Decepticons aren't really the real antagonists in EarthSpark. Sure, some cons like Swindle and Soundwave show up occasionally to be the villain of the episode, but they're only temporary villains if anything. Soundwave, for instance, you can argue isn't necessarily a villain, as in his Spotlight episode Decoy, he only chooses to engage the Optimus and Megatron after they detained his cassette cons. The real villains of EarthSpark instead are humans. Now of course the Transformers franchise is no stranger to having human villains. People like Dr. Archibald from the G1 cartoon, the several brief supervillains in Animated, Silas and his terrorist group Mech in Prime, and so on. But with the exception of Dr. Morocco and Rescue Bots, none of these villains really run their show, so to speak. They're more so distractions and ways for the show to take focus away from the Decepticons so they can be perceived by the audience as a far more serious threat than the Autobots. With EarthSpark though, this is flipped on its head with its main antagonist, Dr. Meridian, aka Mandroid.
Nothing can kill my noble purpose, not the loss of my resources, not injury, not even death.
Swapping out one M for another, Dr. Meridian, or Mandroid as he's come to be known by the Terrans, is EarthSpark's big bad. The thing with most human villains in the Transformers franchise is that more often than not, they kind of come across as rather lame compared to the usual Decepticons the Autobots go against. Along with that, the human villain's only real motivation is more often than not simply something along the lines of wipe out Autobots using Decepticon technology and take over the world, or team up with Decepticons to beat Autobots, then betray them and take over the world. Thankfully, Mandroid is neither of those. He's almost painted in a sympathetic light with his motivations, but it's taken to the absolute extreme with his character. As we come to learn throughout the show, Mandroid is a former robotics professor who actually taught at the same university as Alex. When the Transformers War started, Mandroid was drafted by G.H.O.S.T into their robotics division, forced to create war machines to help the Autobots and human military. During the Battle of the Bay in San Francisco though, Autobot friendly fire destroyed the building he was stationed at, causing him to lose his right arm in the process. He was saved by his Arachnomechs, and from then on made it his life's mission to find a way to wipe out all Transformers on Earth, believing them to be a threat to humanity. So yeah, Mandroid isn't some mad, power-hungry scientist seeking world domination here. He genuinely believes he's saving the world with his actions, explaining himself pretty well right here.
To become humanity's guardian, the hero this planet needs. With my enhanced form, I shall rid Earth of all violent beings.
Mandroid is an extremely competent villain, posing a genuine threat to the Autobots, Terrans, and Decepticons. The performance of his voice actor, Diedrich Bader, is what really sells it though. He's able to voice Mandroid in a way that genuinely makes it come across as a serious, evil villain, but also have his own unique, if warped, sense of humor that is pretty much synonymous with most Y7 show's villains. We'll talk more about Mandroid later on in this video, but these first 10 episodes serve as a pretty great way of establishing his wants and needs, while also separating him from every other human villain that's come before him. He only ends up becoming a better villain because of this as the series goes on. And with that, the first 10 episodes of EarthSpark come to an end. Twitch and Thrash have completed their first real test against Mandroid, who is seemingly dead after a big fight with the Maltos and Autobots, and are on their way to seemingly becoming proper Transformers with the help of their human family. Except for one little thing that happens in the end. They now have 3 new Terran siblings they need help raise and teach as well. Hashtag, Jawbreaker, and Nightshade. This huge twist at the end of adding 3 new main characters, fresh new faces for the Malto family as well, serves as the driving force for the next batch of episodes, Season 1B. Season 1A was all about Robby and Mo helping Twitch and Thrash learn what it means to be Transformers. Now that we've got 10 episodes to get to know them and see them grow into semi-capable Terrans, it's now their turn to become teachers, doing what they can to pass on what Bumblebee taught them to their 3 new siblings. With help from Bee and the rest of their family, of course.
Transformers go home? But this is our home.
After the first 10 episodes of EarthSpark were released, the show went on break for almost 3.5 months. The second batch of episodes, which were episodes 11 through 18, were released on Paramount Plus on March 3rd, 2023. Quite a few people online, as well as personal friends I've spoken to who are fans of the show, claim that this third of the show was easily EarthSpark's strongest. And while I think the finale of 1C is overall the best progressive story for this season, I would have to agree that these 8 episodes are the single best batch of episodes if placed back to back with each other. This arc is a lot more focused than the last 10 episodes. The majority of these 8 episodes move along the broader narrative of EarthSpark, barely taking detours into filler territory. Even when there are filler episodes though, they're probably the best ones in the entire series. As I stated earlier, EarthSpark Season 1B focuses more so on the 3 new Terrans introduced in the last 2 episodes of Season 1A. Those once again are Hashtag, Jawbreaker, aka JB, and Nightshade. We get to see how these 3 new Terrans blend in with the cast we've come to know and love from the first 10 episodes primarily, and really grow as characters like we saw Twitch and Thrash do in the first batch. They all learn who they are and want to be as Terrans, struggle with choosing their all modes and passions, and try to make a difference in a world that mostly despises their kind. Of course, Twitch, Thrash, and the other Maltos still get moments to shine this batch as well, but they're no longer the only focus in EarthSpark, which I really enjoy. I loved watching Twitch and Thrash grow along with Robby and Mo in episodes 1 through 10, but if it was just them for nearly the whole season learning lessons, I feel like it would have gotten too repetitive, since by this point, most of the audience knows how these characters act now. With these new Terrans, we get to see new personalities clash and interact with the already established ones we've come to know. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about these new Terrans, starting with Hashtag.
Oh, cyber sleuthing, eh? Well, you came to the right gumshoe.
We've had several Transformers throughout the franchise's history that are obsessed with human culture, specifically in terms of media and entertainment. Soundwave, Blaster, IDW Thundercracker, Animated Bulkhead, and even Cyberverse RC and Grimlock. But media has changed a lot over the past 40 years, so much so that EarthSpark even points it out when Robby first sees Soundwave in his cassettes.
What even is a cassette anyway?
Oh god, that makes me feel old. But my point still stands. We don't have iPods, VHS, boomboxes, or big boxy TVs anymore. Most kids, praying they don't watch Cocomelon, stream everything they watch now. Whether it be a TV show on their phone or tablet, videos of their favorite YouTubers, like yours truly, and so on. Hashtag is the perfect personification of kids born in the late 2000s and early to mid 2010s. She's obsessed with the internet, loves digesting anything and everything she can download, and uses that information to both formulate her own opinions on others and the world around her, as well as to fight and protect her family. In this first batch, rarely does a scene go by where she's not on this makeshift tablet she created, either watching videos online or taking selfies everywhere she goes. This plays right into a unique power she has from her other Terran siblings, and it may very well be one of the most overpowered abilities a Transformer has ever had. Complete control of wireless electronics in her vicinity. In the first episode of this batch called Hashtag Oops, Hashtag picks a Ghost surveillance van as her alt mode. This allows her to tap into the entirety of Ghost's electronic system in Witwicky and beyond, going so far as to allow her control of other cars around her she can almost telepathically throw at her enemies. Thankfully though, this ability is nerfed by Hashtag's overall personality. She's still practically a newborn Transformer, still getting used to controlling this power and finding new ways to utilize it. And while I'd argue that by the end of the season she's mastered it fairly well, there's still so much more she can learn to do with it in Season 2 and potentially beyond. Personality-wise, Hashtag is a lot like her older sister Twitch, but quite a bit more immature and excitable. This is to be expected though, of course, being younger than Twitch and not having the same amount of time to develop as her. I'd argue that besides Twitch and Thrash's sibling connection, Twitch and Hashtag have one of the next strongest bonds. Hashtag's voice actress Stephanie Lemlin is amazing at playing Hashtag as her usual cheery and extroverted self, but also her more vulnerable, intimate moments. You might recognize Stephanie Lemlin as a voice actress from the Call of Duty Black Ops games, where she voiced Misty in the Zombies modes in Black Ops 2 and 4, as well as the Operator Zero in Black Ops 4's multiplayer mode. Realizing Misty, Zero, and Hashtag all have the same VA is hilarious in hindsight. Like, just imagine Hashtag saying some of these lovely lines.
Oh, I am gonna kill so many road trotters with you, buddy. This your strategy now? Just f***ing swarm all over me? Does this look too heavy for me? Cause you know, I've been carrying this whole damn team. Well, it ain't the size of the gun in the fight, but the size of the fight in the... Ah, fuck it, pistols suck. Tacom, give us something tougher next time. We are done here. Get wrecked, scrub.
Back to Hashtag's vulnerable side. I'll get into this more when we talk about the final batch of episodes, since that's when this part of Hashtag is on full display, but we get to see the side of Hashtag take form in the finale of this batch. In episodes 17 and 18, Home Parts 1 and 2, Hashtag experiences firsthand two traumatic events: racism and borderline assault. First, when she, Twitch, and Robby are hanging out with one of Robby's old friends from his time in Philadelphia, Hashtag is immediately unsettled when she notices graffiti that reads "Transformers Go Home." Not too long after that, upon discovering Mandroid to be alive and well and running an underground Transformers fight club where bots fight each other to get energon in front of an audience, Hashtag tries to stop him. This results in Mandroid managing to attach a mind control chip to her body, putting her under his control and being forced to try and kill her siblings by him. Thankfully, Twitch and the other Maltos managed to break her out of her mind control, but this event has lasting consequences on her character, which once again, I'll discuss further in this video during my review of Season 1C. Long story short, Stephanie Lemlin plays both sides of Hashtag perfectly, and never once did I find myself annoyed with her character or performance. At this point, I was planning on jumping right into my brief analysis of Jawbreaker, but I figure instead, with having just talked about the bad stuff Hashtag went through, we can discuss another thing I love about EarthSpark, that being the surprising maturity it carries with its themes.
Sometimes the world can be a scary place. It's hard to know who's dangerous or not.
I want to take this time to ask you, my audience, a question. What, in your opinion, is the most mature Transformers story to you? Is it Prime, Animated, Bayverse? There's solid reasoning for all these choices, and others. You could say Prime is the darkest for its brutal violence and deaths. You could say Animated was for how dark its third season got, and so on. But for me, personally, while these shows may be dark, I wouldn't necessarily call them mature. To me, that title goes to EarthSpark. But to be fair, while EarthSpark may not get as violent as other shows like Prime or Cyberverse, the fight choreography of this show is phenomenal. This is in large part due to amazing storyboard artists like India Swift, Stephanie Ressler, and my personal favorite, Kevin Molino Ortiz. He has worked on many epic shows lately, creating awesome fight scenes. You might recognize his work on Rise of the Teenage Ninja Turtles, Invincible's Adam Eve special, or of all things, this one trailer/ad for the Marble Snap mobile game. I'm sure you've all seen the incredible fight scene from EarthSpark where Optimus and Megatron battle Skywarp and Nova Storm. That scene was storyboarded by none other than Kevin himself. His work on this, as well as the ending of episode 14 with Bumblebee and Breakdown, is absolutely incredible. There's a reason why it's regarded by many fans to be the best fight in Transformers history. But back on topic. You see, a show being mature means more than just being dark, edgy, or having brutal violence or other shocking content. Being mature means that the show has stuff like deep subject matter, or themes that challenge the audience. For a Y7 show, it's pretty incredible just how well EarthSpark pulls off these topics. Stuff like racism, being the children of immigrants, gender identity, the homophobia and transphobia LGBTQ people suffer, and more are topics that are referenced constantly throughout the show. Now, of course, like any show that actually gets the balls to cover such stuff, EarthSpark has gotten controversy from, certain groups of people claiming that the show is woke and after your children to make them gay or whatever. Don't I sound stupid saying all this? How do people actually believe EarthSpark does this? I don't want to harbor on this for too long. We'll come back to this in another section of this video later on. Just know that, to me at least, EarthSpark handles these sensitive subjects really well, and is very needed in kids media in such heavily trying times like the 2020s have been so far. But with this detour out of the way, let's go back to discussing more of these new Terrans, and the one I honestly relate to the most, Jawbreaker.
I just wanted everyone to know that I can be fierce. That I can be more than one thing and not get put on the sidelines anymore.
Now, let me level with you guys. More often than not, I'm not the biggest fan of the gentle giant character archetype. I don't hate these characters, but I'm often more so indifferent towards them. Bulkhead, for instance, in Prime and Animated, I have no real connection to. I like both versions of him as characters, sure, but they don't stand out to me like, let's say, Smokescreen in Prime or Optimus in Animated does. I am so happy to say that with Jawbreaker, though, this is not the case. I'd argue that after having finished all of Season 1, JB is the Terran I can relate the most to, and is tied with Thrash as probably my favorite. Compared to his two other twin siblings, Hashtag and Nightshade, Jawbreaker develops as a character a lot slower. But instead of it just being because the writers have no idea what to do with his character until later on in the season, this is actually an intentional choice, and in my opinion, is a way to further show off to the audience just who Jawbreaker is supposed to represent. if hashtag is meant to represent those kids of today who are more addicted to an online social space and victims of PTSD and other trauma, and Twitch is meant to portray those with perfection syndrome, I think Nickelodeon is trying to portray Jawbreaker as an autistic child. Now, bear in mind here, it is in no way confirmed by the show or its creators as of this release, and I myself am not someone who is diagnosed autistic. But from others in my life who are autistic, I see many familiar traits in JB's personality. This is best shown in episode 12 of this batch called Outtakes. In this episode, Jawbreaker wants to figure out what his alt mode will be, but struggles a lot with choosing. Hashtag, who just got her alt mode in the previous episode, offers to help him make a documentary film where they interview the other Terrans and Autobots for how they chose their alt modes. Where JB's potentially autistic traits shine the most in this episode is towards the end of it. After spending most of the episode's runtime struggling to find his alt mode, he has a sudden realization after a conversation with Alita 1. Here, Jawbreaker tells her how nervous he is about choosing the right alt mode, and when Alita tells him that his spark will know what's right for him, he asks further how will he know when his spark knows. That then leads to a line that absolutely devastated me upon my first watching of this episode.
But what if I'm broken or something? When I look at cars, I feel nothing.
The moment where Jawbreaker asks Alita if he's broken, how he describes feeling nothing when looking at cars and other vehicles. It's just such a powerful scene. This is why I believe JB might potentially be autistic. Like most other autistic children, they aren't going to react to things the same way others will. Alternatively, this whole scene could be interpreted as an allegory for a child coming out as gay, bi, trans, or so on. The way Jawbreaker mentions how he feels nothing towards cars could be easily compared to how a gay kid might feel nothing about girls. It was entirely because of this episode, in fact, that I decided to come out online as bisexual. I felt exactly like Jawbreaker did when I first realized I was bi. When I was 13 and realized I started to have more romantic feelings towards other boys in my class more often than the girls scared me. I felt like it was wrong to feel that way. I didn't end up coming out to my parents for another 10 years after that. It's absolutely incredible how Jawbreaker's voice actor is able to play him as such an emotional yet earnest character. It's even more impressive when you realize that this is the first ever time his VA, Cyrus Arnold, has actually done voice acting. He was only 18 or 19 years old when he recorded his lines as JB, and while I will admit his performance in episodes 9 and 10 did feel a bit amateur, Cyrus Arnold improved significantly in the second and third batches of episodes. It makes me very excited to see how his voice acting grows as the series continues with season 2, and hopefully beyond that. Anyway, long story short, JB takes Alita's words to heart. She suggests to him that perhaps a vehicle is not what his alt mode was meant to be, and that whatever he chooses, it doesn't have to be what all of his siblings choose. This is best explained in Jawbreaker's ending speech to Hashtag in this episode, which I'll play right here.
Before, I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't know why I couldn't just pick an alt mode, like everybody else. Well, it's because I'm not like everybody else. I'm not gonna be a car, or a truck, or anything like that. I don't know what I'll be. But when I feel it in my spark, you'll be the first one to know.
And so, Jawbreaker ends up being the only Terran to not get his alt mode by the end of this batch of episodes. But never once is it treated like a bad thing, at least in this batch. JB has come to peace with the fact that it'll be a while before he finds out what he wants his alt mode to be. It's such an empowering message and makes the moment when he finally chooses his alt mode even better. This happens in the first episode of the final batch with episode 19, A Stidgy Situation. As the name implies, he ends up choosing a Stidgy Moloch as his alt mode, which I think perfectly encapsulates his personality. Like his older brother Thrash, Jawbreaker has a really strong connection to his sister Mo as well, and just like her bonds with Thrash, it is so fun to watch her and Jawbreaker interact. While this technically doesn't happen until the third batch, their discussions in A Stidgy Situation are so good, on the same level as Mo's talks with Thrash back in House Rules, and another episode in this batch, Warzone. So that's the basics of Jawbreaker. Now to round out the Maltos, we're going to end off with a character who I'm sure many of you have heard about, even if you haven't watched EarthSpark yet. Yes, that's right, it's time to discuss arguably the most controversial character in recent Transformers history, for some reason, Nightshade.
I always knew my pronouns felt right, but what a wonderful word for a wonderful experience.
So let's just jump to it. Yes, Nightshade is a very special character in Transformers EarthSpark. This is due to the fact that they are the first ever truly non-binary character in the entire franchise. I'm sure even if you haven't seen EarthSpark yet, you've at least seen this clip shared around the internet.
Oh, may I be the bobblehead?
Of course. Morgan, can you switch,
Nightshade's pronouns are they, them.
He or she just doesn't fit who I am.
To say Nightshade made an impact on the fandom and larger media industry would be an understatement. There's been a multitude of reactions from both those inside and outside of the Transformers fandom to their introduction as an NB Cybertronian. Many fans, especially those in the LGBT space, have been overjoyed to see proper non-binary reputation in their favorite franchise. For context, the Transformers series hasn't really had proper LGBT representation outside the IDW comics for the past 40 years. In those comics, we had Ratchet and Drift be a canonically gay couple, and even RC is a transgender lesbian. And those are just some of the most memorable ones. To finally have those same kinds of characters in a Transformers cartoon, which are far more popular than the comics, mind you, to the general public, is a welcome change. At the same time, though, there are unfortunately others who see Nightshade's character as some sort of bad omen. Conservatives online and even Fox News have gone out to say that EarthSpark is peddling a woke agenda by merely having Nightshade exist as a non-binary character. Kids shouldn't have to deal with pronouns according to them. So let me get this straight. It's okay for elementary schools to feature educational material that contains explicit heterosexual relationships, but God forbid we include a gay or non-binary character in a show without any romantic subplots whatsoever? Like, how is that fair? And it's not like the show even goes out of its way to constantly stress to the audience that Nightshade is non-binary. Throughout the 16 episodes therein, Nightshade's pronouns are only brought up in 3 of those episodes. Each of those scenes range anywhere from 10 seconds to about 2 minutes long. Is that really so bad to have in a children's show? Watching EarthSpark isn't going to turn your child gay or non-binary. All it's doing is teaching children that these kinds of people exist and are valid, just like any straight person is. And maybe there are some closeted LGBT kids that will find the courage to come out to their family and friends because of this show. Why is it harmful to show people that actually exist? Not everyone in the world is going to be a straight white dude. Exposing children to people of other backgrounds, whether it be of different race, sexuality, or gender, isn't going to harm them. In fact, pretending like they don't exist until they get older will just make it worse and potentially turn them bigoted when they're older. And not to mention, just because Nightshade is non-binary, that doesn't automatically make them a sexual deviant. Do you see Nightshade making flirty remarks to other characters in the show constantly? No, of course you don't. Just because someone's non-binary doesn't mean they're some hypersexual freak. Nightshade is non-binary, sure, but EarthSpark doesn't make that fact their whole identity. They aren't just the NB one to the rest of their cast. They're the scientist, they're the smart one, they're the one always willing to see the best in people when others won't. Those are what define Nightshade, not their gender or their pronouns. Sorry about that little rant. I wanted to try and keep most of this talk off the politics, as some people would say, but gender discussion isn't political at all, it's just a fact. Nightshade being non-binary should not be controversial. They're just a character like everyone else in this show, and someone who maybe some child who hasn't realized they're non-binary yet can look up to and say, wow, there's someone actually like me in the shows I watch. Why, several of my friends who are also non-binary have reached out personally to tell me just how much they love how accurately Nightshade reflects their own lives as non-binary people. To go into further detail on everyone's favorite mad scientist owl, I reached out to a few more of my friends in the Transformers fandom. So here are my good buddies Jaymotions, Emperor Kumquat, and Little Miss TFC, aka Val, have all reached out to share with you what they all love about Nightshade and why they believe Nightshade is such a great character and representation for non-binary people.
First off, I want to thank my friend Autobot Sonic for giving me this platform to talk about one of my favorite cartoons of all time. EarthSpark is very important to me for many reasons. It was the first Transformers cartoon me and my partner exclusively experienced together, and of course the show introduced me to Nightshade when I was first exploring my gender. Obviously they became one of my favorite characters in the franchise after that. I really enjoyed that they were introduced into the story organically and that they weren't only respected in their gender, but it was explored a little bit. Seeing such a blatantly non-binary character is so wonderful to see normalized in a kid's show, especially such a charming and lovable one, but Nightshade's only one aspect of this story. It has so much more to offer. The episode Missed Connection is one of my favorite examples of this, and not just because my beautiful child Nightshade is the lead character either. This episode is about Nightshade and their journey to find their alt mode, something they don't see a need for, but in their journey they meet the Decepticon Tarantulas, but rather than a combatant wishing them harm, a recluse who wishes to stay hidden from everyone and live a normal life. Throughout this episode, we actually get to hear Tarantulas explain his views on alt modes.
Young one, alt forms aren't meant to complete you, as though you have a missing part. They further express who you already are.
I haven't heard it explained that way before.
It's common knowledge that EarthSpark included the first openly non-binary robot who uses they-them, which caused so much controversy that the show was brought up on Fox News. Transphobic people tried to bomb the ratings of the show out of spite. The writers would have known this would happen, but they did not back down. They would have known as well that there would be protests about the human family being people of color. Yes, when the cast was first announced, there were some people complaining about the mere appearance of the humans. There should be nothing to talk about. It shouldn't have to be brave just to treat people as people. But we still have to normalize normal people.
The most important character in EarthSpark for me is our favorite scientist owl, Nightshade. Growing up with Transformers being one of the first things that made me realize that I'm a queer as fuck person. Nightshade is a character that young me would have loved. Seeing Transformers finally recognize their huge LGBTQ+ fan base in a major Transformers show was something that I've waited for since I was a kid figuring out their life. The 2 times Nightshade explored their gender identity legitimately made me break down crying from happiness, especially regarding their relationship with Sam. They both found out that they're not alone, that there are other people like them, that they are enough. I am deeply thankful to be here to have a character that confirms, sorry for my voice right now, that one of the many hyperfixations that saved my life has seen me. It also helps that they're a likable and enduring character that has a charming engineering hyperfixation, has a loving relationship with their family, and formed a wholesome bond with Tarantulas in one of the parts of the first season. Also, they're a badass lechuza. Nice! In a year of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation, an alarming rise in homophobia and transphobia in the fan base, and right-wing media trying to think of the children when it comes to EarthSpark, I'm just glad that Transformers is making a stand against such hatred and bigoted BS. Many LGBTQ+ fans, especially young children who are figuring themselves out right now, deserve to see themselves as the heroes in a franchise that is literally one of the most queer-coded media in existence. This character is gonna save the lives of so many kids. I applaud everyone in the staff of this show who made it possible for Nightshade to be one of the main heroes of this story. Nightshade is a character that means a lot to me as an LGBTQ+ fan of Transformers for a long time, and I hope it opens the door for many characters to come down the road in the future.
Just like Hashtag and Jawbreaker's VAs, Nightshade's is as equally as impressive. They're voiced by Z Infante, who is also non-binary. Of course, this seems like a no-brainer, make the NB character be voiced by an NB VA, but you'd be surprised at how often this is not the case in media. Z Infante has a large history in theater performances, which I think helps a lot with making Nightshade's more, theatrical personality feel genuine. They deliver most of their lines with such gravitas and drama, it almost makes Nightshade feel like they're the most emotional ones in a scene. Thankfully though, this is never to the point where it feels like their reactions are out of place among other characters like the rest of their family. With that now, all of our main characters in EarthSpark have been discussed quite a bit, detailing their personalities, wants, needs, and so on. So I want to take the time here to go back to the cast of legacy characters this show has to offer. As with the last batch, Batch 1B has its own share of legacy Transformers that get time to shine. Some are absolutely fantastic, others not so much, unfortunately.
That sounds dangerous. And danger's my favorite gear.
While we already covered the big 3 legacy characters of EarthSpark, those being Optimus, Megatron, and Bumblebee, I want to focus more on the guest stars, if you want to call them that this time. These guys aren't the focus of EarthSpark per se, but they do still get to be important for the 1 or 2 episodes they're mostly prevalent in. Take Brothers Swindle and Hardtop, for instance. It's been a while since we've seen Swindle be a main character in a Transformers cartoon, almost 20 years since he was last seen and animated. Of course, he was rather important in the IDW comics as well, both the original 2005 continuity and the 2019 reboot. But again, as much as I love the comics, the general public doesn't really know them. It's been even longer since we've seen Hardtop, let alone have him and Swindle be brothers again. The only other time I can think that was the case was back in the Energon anime. To me, the 2 of them are kind of the Team Rocket of EarthSpark. They're villains, but laughably so. They pop in every now and then to give the Maltos some trouble, have fun, and so on. I'm personally really fond of Swindle's portrayal, who's brought to life perfectly by his VA Nolan North. He's no stranger to voicing Transformers shows either, having previously voiced my original favorite character in the franchise, Smokescreen, back in Transformers Prime. To see him play such a little gremlin and swindle compared to Rodimus Light back in Prime is a fun change-up, especially when he's in a scene with Hardtop, who Nolan North also voices. Granted, he doesn't really change his voice up between either character, but Hardtop rarely speaks, and I think it mostly excuses this fact. Wheeljack is another great minor legacy character in EarthSpark. He's only important to 2 of the first season's 26 episodes, but he still leaves an impact on the main cast despite this. This impact is seen mostly with his relationship with Twitch. In case you forgot, her alt mode is based off one of his Energon scanning drones he created. Once Twitch realizes this after discovering him in the Forest of Witwicky, she immediately starts to cling to him as a paternal figure, affectionately calling him Dad 2 for the remainder of the series. I love how Wheeljack and Twitch interact with each other, and the lessons he teaches her on how to fully utilize her alt mode actually really help her grow as a character. Wheeljack also introduces a trend that pretty much all the Terrans, except for Thrash because of course he gets neglected, deal with, and a trend I actually really enjoy. That trend is each of them finding a father figure of sorts to learn life lessons under. So in Twitch's case, it's Wheeljack. The next one to get a figure like this is Nightshade. And who do they get as a surrogate father? None other than Tarantulas. Yeah, the creepy spider dude from Beast Wars and the mad scientist from IDW Comics. That Tarantulas. And I can't think of a better character to have been partnered up with them. Tarantulas shows up in Nightshade's Spotlight episode, which is episode 13, Missed Connection. When Nightshade doesn't feel like they're understood by the rest of their family, they end up running into Tarantulas in the Witwicky Cemetery. Similarly to his IDW counterpart, EarthSpark Tarantulas is a scientist as well, though in a surprising twist, is actually a good-hearted Decepticon, if only a little eccentric and a bit of a recluse. Tarantulas is the ultimate introvert, not wanting to be hounded by any of the Cybertronians still on Earth, but at the same time wanting to avoid capture by G.H.O.S.T. To get past this, he plans to create a holographic projector that will allow him to appear as a human avatar, and therefore blend in with human society. I love how while technically Tarantulas is the villain of this episode, he's not really a bad guy. Nightshade is drawn to his love for science and actually helps him finish the projector. While they work, Tarantulas even gives Nightshade great advice on what it means to have an alt mode. You saw my buddy Jaymotions talk about this earlier back when discussing Nightshade, and I couldn't agree more with them. See, while Jawbreaker struggled with finding an alt mode because he was worried about choosing the right one, Nightshade was actually content with never getting one. This is because to them, they felt they could accomplish whatever they wanted to do without one. Now how about Grimlock? He serves as Jawbreaker's parental figure in the same vein as Wheeljack for Twitch and Tarantulas for Nightshade. Although, compared to those two previous examples, I don't think we sadly get to see the two of them interact enough. However, this doesn't mean EarthSpark Grimlock is a bad character, far from it. His characterization is very similar in fact to Cyberverse Grimlock, a mech who's actually pretty civilized in bot mode but becomes his more bestial self when he transforms. He's not as formal as Cyberverse Grimlock though, and I think that's a good change. I don't want to see the same thing twice. Ryan Andes did a great job as him back in Cyberverse, but I want to see something different. To me, EarthSpark Grimlock is a nice balance between the formalness of Cyberverse and the dumb but lovable idiot that was RID-15 Grimlock, played by Kari Payton. EarthSpark Grim is voiced by Keith David, who you'll probably recognize most recently as having been one of my favorite characters in Hazbin Hotel, Husker, but also many video game roles like Spawn, the Arbiter in the Halo franchise, and Anderson in the Mass Effect series. I especially love how, unlike Tarantulas, he actually tries to discourage Jawbreaker from desiring an alt mode. Grimlock constantly stresses to him that he doesn't need an alt mode to be the best version of himself, and it's such a unique take I don't think we've ever seen a Transformers character have. To so vehemently reject their own alt mode. This is of course due to his own trauma that he suffered under Mandroid's control, but without adding another hour to this video, I'll hold off on diving further into that topic. And then there's Breakdown. Oh boy, Breakdown, Breakdown, Breakdown. Where do I start with talking about the guy who's easily my favorite side character in EarthSpark? For context, prior to watching EarthSpark, my only background of Breakdown is primarily through the Prime cartoon and the IDW comics. There, he's the big brood of Decepticons, Bulkhead's rival, and a gay icon with Knockout, who's his canonical husband in the IDW comics. So when I saw him at first in EarthSpark looking much more like his G1 incarnation and seemingly friends with Bumblebee, I didn't know what to expect. If anything, I figured instead Breakdown was going to be Bee's rival, but maybe later on it would be revealed that Breakdown is in a gay relationship with EarthSpark's version of Knockout. Whenever he would show up. Instead, I got what is arguably the gayest bromance between two Transformers characters since Prime Breakdown and Knockout, and is easily my favorite character duo in this show. Breakdown Spotlight episode Security Protocols is legit my favorite episode of Season 1 outside the finale for this exact reason. To make a long story short, this is the episode where Bee's past finally catches up to him. See, while Bee was pretending to be dead in the 15 years after the Transformers War ended, he killed time by entering different street races around the world. One of these we heard about all the way back in episode 6, Traditions, being on the Philippine island Alex grew up on. Turns out G.H.O.S.T has been monitoring all these races, which are all won by a black and yellow sports car very similar to Bee's alt mode. Schloder ends up believing that Bee is Alex's car and kidnaps Alex to try and force Bee to save him. Dot is furious with Bee at first, thinking he's just been irresponsibly chasing an adrenaline high. B clarifies to her that this isn't the case, but instead to try and find his closest friend from Cybertron named Breakdown, my beloved. In EarthSpark, B and Breakdown, my beloved, were very close, to the point where B goes as far as to consider him close to a brother. Breakdown calls B brother a lot throughout the course of the show too, so the relationship is clearly shared mutually between each other. However, you could also totally interpret this relationship as daring to be romantic even. With the way B and Breakdown interact throughout this episode, like, my god, just make them gay, please! You've already made 2 Breakdowns in the past gay, what's one more? Anyway, Breakdown, my beloved, bounces perfectly with Bumblebee. The two get along without any problems, and Breakdown to me feels like an exact mirror of B. They're both hotshots who love a race, but Bumblebee has matured over the past 14 episodes thanks to his experiences with the Maltos. He even claims to Breakdown that he can't do stupid stuff with him anymore because he has a family now. Breakdown feels like what B would have probably been if he never met the Maltos, and I like seeing this. It also helps that Breakdown's VA, Roger Craig Smith, makes him sound like the most goddamn charming guy you've ever met. Like, for God's sake, B, how are you not falling for this guy every time he opens his mouth? If Roger Craig Smith sounds familiar at all, you'll probably recognize him as the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog since 2010, or Ezio from the Assassin's Creed series. His Breakdown voice, though, reminds me of a nice mix of his Chris Redfield voice from the Resident Evil series and Mirage from Apex Legends. The ending of this episode works so well because of how impactful Breakdown is in just the 10 minutes we get to know him. Sure, it's only 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes make you truly believe that he and Bumblebee really care for each other, maybe even love each other. The way Breakdown is so willing to sacrifice himself just so B can escape Ghost since he's still got the Maltos speaks volumes of his character as well. The slow motion of this scene where Breakdown throws B over stadium walls in the pouring rain, the way B transforms in midair desperately trying to grab Breakdown and take him with them, and then the last smile Breakdown gives him before he's saved by Ghost, oh my god, it's so fucking good! And the best part, this wasn't even the original version of this scene. In storyboards released by Kevin Molina Ortiz, it seems like Breakdown might have very well was originally going to die in the first version of this scene. As Croft and the rest of the Ghosts shot at Breakdown, his whole body would have been pretty much destroyed. His windshield gets shattered, front bumper and rear spoiler shut off, he even loses the whole sunroof of his alt mode. And then finally there's one last shot of Croft stabbing Breakdown in the neck with an energy staff. God, this would have killed me, and for once, I'm glad Hasbro decided not to go this dark, and instead keep Breakdown alive. Nickelodeon, I'm begging you, make Breakbee canon. Okay, sorry, I got a little carried away there. But unfortunately, as great as the example legacy characters I previously explained are, not all of them hit this mark. Let's start off with the biggest offender here of wasted potential in EarthSpark. That, sadly, is Alita 1. When Alita was first announced to be in EarthSpark, I was hyped. Alita hadn't been important in the Transformers cartoon in over 15 years since animated, and aside from the IW comics, hasn't had anything done with her since. Knowing that she was going to be the second in command to the Autobots, a role usually given to someone like Prowl, Ratchet, or Bumblebee in other continuities, was awesome to hear. Even more awesome, she was going to be voiced by one of my favorite VAs ever, Cissy Jones. For my Telltale fans, you'll recognize her as the voice of Katja and Shell in The Walking Dead, among other smaller roles, which, fun fact, was her first ever voice acting role. So to see a VA from one of my favorite franchises come over to voice a character in another favorite franchise of mine was really great to see. Unfortunately though, she does little to nothing. Don't get me wrong though, in EarthSpark, Alita is a great character. She has an awesome fight scene in episode 1 with Optimus battling Swindle and Hardtop, and as stated before, her scene with Jawbreaker and outtakes made that episode one of my favorites. But here's the thing, that's literally all she does. In the months leading up to EarthSpark's release, Alita was advertised to be a very important character in the show, on the same level as Optimus and Megatron. Despite this though, she barely gets half the screen time as these two. But let me break it down this way. Out of 26 episodes in Season 1, Optimus appears in half of those, 13 to be exact. Megatron appears in 11. Granted, some of these appearances from Megs and Optimus are only brief one-liners or whatever, but still, they're pretty prominent characters in each one. How many episodes does Alita appear in comparison? 7. 7 episodes. And she doesn't even speak in 2 of them. She's a main character in episodes 1 and 2, shows up for a scene in episode 3, is a big part of episodes 12 and 19, and then appears in 24 and 26 without any voice whatsoever. This is even counting 2 blink and you'll miss it moments of her showing up briefly in episodes 4 and 8, but they're so minuscule I'm not even gonna bother counting them. Now see, this wouldn't be a problem if EarthSpark didn't advertise Alita to be a huge character on the same level as Optimus or Megatron. It comes across like we should be happy with seeing Alita at all for the first time in 15 years. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely am. Cissy Jones portrays Alita perfectly, but the problem is I believe we don't get enough of her. The same could be said for the other 2 poor legacy characters, as I like to call them, those being RC and Soundwave. Now, before I continue with this, do not misinterpret me calling these characters poor because they're bad. Far from it. In the case of both RC and Soundwave, I think their designs are incredible, especially Soundwave's. It's probably my favorite version of him across any design he's ever had. And having RC be an outgoing, super positive girl who's got a sort of a big sister vibe with B is such a big departure from her Cyberburst and Prime incarnations that I can't help but love her. The reason why I feel they both missed the mark is unfortunately, just like with Alita, they're not utilized enough. I get what the EarthSpark creatives are going for, this show is about the Terrans first and foremost, but I feel like these two characters really didn't get any time to shine. Compare them to others like Tarantulas and Breakdown, my beloved, who only appeared primarily in one episode each, but felt way more fleshed out than RC and Soundwave did. It's really upsetting in Soundwave's case especially, because he was supposed to have far more to do in the show, which is a perfect way to segue into our next segment, the deleted scenes of EarthSpark.
Megatron will be forced to face his betrayal. That puts a sizzle in your spark, right?
Yay.
Like many shows, films, and video games, there were many things left behind on the cutting room floor during development of EarthSpark. Some of it I've mentioned before, like Breakdown's supposed death at the end of security protocols, but I want to bring to light something interesting in the form of entire cut episodes of EarthSpark. You see, back in March of 2023, the EarthSpark series Bible was discovered online. In it, outlines for many episodes of Season 1 were detailed, but a few are mentioned that didn't quite make it into the final list of episodes. It's a shame too, because some of them sound really promising. One of these includes Hashtag becoming an online celebrity, making some of her human friends online want to meet her in person at a convention. The problem is, though, is that they think Hashtag's a human, and she desperately tries to hide the fact that she's a Terran throughout the whole episode. I really thought this could make for a nice comedic filler episode, but also a deep one on how some people feel like they need to project a fake persona online to hide who they truly are, just in order to make some friends. Here's hoping they'll be able to turn this into an episode in Season 2. Another scrapped episode involved Nightshade finding a bunch of lost arachnomechs and taking them on as lab assistants, unaware of the danger they could pose. This makes sense considering before episode 18, Nightshade would have never seen one before. It feels very similar to traditions in that regard, actually. The final episode was one involving Optimus and Megatron, creating a huge change in Megatron's character. In this episode, Megatron would have discovered a big secret Optimus and Dob would have been keeping from him. This would have caused Megatron to defect from G.H.O.S.T entirely, stealing the Emberstone and sort of becoming an antagonist for the rest of the season. Compared to the other two episodes though, I'm glad this one was cut. I really don't want to see Megatron turn back into a bad guy. It's a refreshing take to see him genuinely want to help Optimus and the other Autobots for once. Not only were entire episodes cut from EarthSpark though, but also scenes from episodes that did end up being produced. Two I want to bring to light are from episodes 13 and 16. The first one is a scrapped, longer intro to Missed Connection. This scene would have shown Nightshade initially having been outside the rest of their family, not feeling like they belong in their game of Transformers tag due to them not desiring an alt mode like their other siblings. They would have snuck back off to the dugout to start working on the smart trainer we see in the final episode. This scene ended up being cut according to the storyboard artist Stephanie Ressler for time constraints. I agree with this honestly. We get just as good of a picture of how Nightshade doesn't feel like they belong later on in the episode, when they don't feel as excited to play more physical games with their siblings. The second scene here though, I can't say I agree with it being cut. This was going to be a series of scenes that play out in the middle of episode 16, Warzone. While Megatron was showing the Maltos around the Space Bridge Memorial Park, a series of scenes involving Soundwave and Starscream attempting to escape would have played. Here, Starscream tells Soundwave that every year, Megatron returns to the park on this day to reminisce and mourn all the Autobots, Decepticons, and humans who died in that battle. This scene also explains why Soundwave had smuggled Ravage into the ghost space back at the end of episode 8, Decoy. As this deleted scene reveals, this was so that Ravage could sneak in and steal remote control for a stasis pod of the park so Starscream could release Shockwave. Also, this scene would have revealed that EarthSpark Ravage is female, a first for the franchise. Ravage's gender was never stated back in Decoy, so this is our only proof that she is truly female in this series. However, with the scene cut out of the final episode, it makes Soundwave smuggling Ravage in a loose end. Like, what was the point? Where did Ravage go? She never shows up again in the show after episode 8, so did she just disappear? It makes no sense. I really don't like being negative about stuff, especially with EarthSpark, but this is just something I can't ignore. Thankfully though, this is the most negative thing I have to say about EarthSpark for the most part. Now it's time to talk about something I think EarthSpark does really well, thankfully, and that is its villains once again. We discussed Mandroid last time, but now I think is a good time to talk about the larger threat in my opinion. That, of course, being G.H.O.S.T.
Global Hazard and Ordnance Strike Team. G.H.O.S.T to civvies.
Global Hazard Ordnance Strike Team, or G.H.O.S.T, are the true big bads of EarthSpark, though this isn't really made apparent at first. We're no strangers to having US military/government branches help out the Autobots in their fight against Decepticons begrudgingly. Take Sector 7 and Nest in the Bayverse films, or Fowler's team in Prime for example. In both of these scenarios, they start off as top-secret branches of the US military, sent to investigate extraterrestrial threats. They're initially hostile after meeting up with the Autobots, but eventually form a tense alliance where they slowly learn to trust and respect Cybertronians as their own intelligent life. Ghost, on the other hand, seem to be the opposite of that. And while sometimes throughout the show we do see some of their agents as your typical bumbling G-men we come to expect in kids shows over the past 20 years, Ghost truly may very well be the single best antagonistic faction in the franchise that is human. Like I said before when discussing Mandroid, we've had groups of human villains before in the Transformers franchise. The best example to me in recent memory was Silas and his group, Mech, back in Prime. In that show, Mech was essentially a terrorist organization run by Silas, wanting to utilize Cybertronian technology in an effort to take over the world. Therefore, it made sense when sometimes in the show we saw Mech team up with Decepticons. They both wanted the Autobots dead. But this time, Ghost is working with the Autobots, fighting the Decepticons. But you're probably asking then, how can they be the bad guys if they're helping the Autobots? Sure, Ghost might have a common enemy with Decepticons, but Ghost doesn't want to just stop at the bad Transformers. Like Mandroid, they want all Cybertronians dead, or seemingly at the very least enslaved. Back in Season 1A, we see Ghost as more so a lesser evil than a truly villainous organization. They help the Autobots capture Decepticons, but Optimus and the Maltos refuse to let them know about the Terrans. To Ghost, they could potentially be some more rogue Decepticons trying to evade arrest. This is best shown in Episode 5, Classified, which sorta acts as our true introduction to the inner workings of Ghost. When Robby is out at a night taking a stroll with Twitch after a nightmare, he accidentally runs into a patrol of Ghost cadets led by a second-in-command organization, Agent Schloder. They don't know who Robby and Twitch are, so when they see Twitch run away with Robby, they don't see Twitch as a Terran, they see her as a Decepticon who just seems to have kidnapped a child. So while Twitch, Robby, Mo, and Thrash have to hide out from Schloder when he comes snooping around their home, Alex and Bumblebee have to keep him busy, and Dot gets put through Ghost orientation with Optimus as her guide. The bit I want to focus on right now is Dot with Optimus. Throughout their part of this episode, we see Optimus, in a very cringe, but intentionally cringe way, try to sell Dot on how much fun it is being a Ghost agent. But of course, Dot, being as smart as she is, sees through Optimus's facade, asking him why he and Ghost in general are trying so hard to be seen as the good guys to the rest of the world. This is even expanded in the start of Episode 9, which takes place at a Ghost party being broadcast across the US to, according to Agent Croft, the leader of Ghost, show the President and the rest of the US government that the alliance with the Autobots is an effort worth continuing to fund. Anyway, Optimus answers Dot by explaining that essentially when the Transformers first came to Earth, very few people actually gave the Autobots a chance. Ghost was the first group to do so, and while Optimus seems to disapprove of how they treat Decepticon prisoners, he and the rest of the Autobots sort of owe it to them to help them in capturing the cons. It was their war that was brought to Earth after all. Optimus thinks it's only fair. And so, Ghost sort of continues to act like this for most of the first season. While they act as allies to the Autobots in fighting Decepticons, there's an occasional scene or moment in every few episodes that hints at something darker. This comes to a head in the ending of Episode 18, Home Part 2. Here, we see that Mandroid, after having been nearly defeated by the Maltos in Philadelphia, retreats to the main Ghost HQ in Witwicky. Agent Croft is there to meet him, where we learn that not only was Mandroid a former Ghost scientist, but the underground Cybertronian fight clubs he was running were actually created by Ghost. Deep down, Croft as the head of Ghost wants to see all Cybertronians detained or subjected to her human servitude, and she's willing to work with terrorists like Mandroid to ensure that her mission is completed. After this moment, Ghost shifts into a completely antagonistic force for the last third of the season, but we'll touch on that later. Right now, I want to talk about the two biggest faces of Ghost in EarthSpark. Those, of course, being Ghost's leader Croft and her brother Schloder.
Either your bots wear these and join Ghost, or you'll never see your family again.
Agents John Schloder and Karen Croft, yes, her first name is actually Karen, are the heads of Ghost, but Croft is really the one in charge. Schloder is more so her right-hand man of sorts, handling most of her missions throughout the course of EarthSpark. We'll start by discussing Schloder, since we really don't get to know Croft until the second third of Season 1. With Schloder being the first named Ghost agent the audience is introduced to, he sort of sets the tone for what to expect from Ghost, at least for the first 10 episodes of the series. Sure, there's the threat of them discovering the Terrans, but it's hard to take them seriously when Schloder, the presumed second-in-command, is such a goofy idiot. And I mean that endearingly, because Schloder is without a doubt the funniest character in EarthSpark besides potentially Alex. That's because his voice actor, Mark Evan Jackson, plays him so straight compared to every other character. It helps too that he has such a history as a comedy actor, most well known for his role on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Schloder acts so serious compared to others, it's downright hilarious, especially with how driven he is to seemingly capture Bumblebee, who he seems to have a personal vendetta against. This is a misdirection, however, but not one I'm particularly fond of. We'll talk about that a little later on when we get to talk about the last 8 episodes of the season. Anyway, Schloder is a funny, but not annoying pseudo-antagonist to have in these first 2/3 of EarthSpark. It's a great contrast compared to his sister, Croft. Remember how I mentioned her first name was Karen? I don't know if that was intentional or not on the showrunner's parts, but it is a very fitting name for her considering her personality. She acts so entitled, incredibly racist towards Cybertronians, and is an absolutely power-hungry with Ghost. If things don't go her way, there's going to be a problem. This is best shown in how she so frequently butts heads with her brother throughout the course of the series. In episode 11, #Oops, for instance, she berates Schloder for not having his soldiers running patrols around Witwicky despite there being no recent Decepticon activity. The best example, though, is in my currently favorite episode of the series, Security Protocols. Man, I love talking about this episode. Anyway, after Croft successfully captures Breakdown, my beloved, she orders her soldiers to arrest Dot and Alex as well on the hunch that they were intentionally harboring Bumblebee and potentially help him escape the stadium alongside Breakdown. However, this is when Schloder comes in and the divide between him and his sister is most apparent. In a surprising twist, Schloder pleads with Croft to let Dot and Alex go, claiming that G.H.O.S.T is about hunting Decepticons, not people. Croft is clearly annoyed by this, but seems to submit to her brother's wishes and lets them go. Whether it be because she doesn't want to risk G.H.O.S.T's public image hurt or some other agenda, I don't know. But this scene perfectly shows off both Croft and Schloder's characters. Schloder genuinely believes G.H.O.S.T are the good guys, going after the bad Transformers and keeping Earth safe. He's completely unaware of what Croft truly intends to do, to essentially take down anyone who opposes her ideals, whether it be Decepticon, Autobot, or human. This continues quite a bit into the final third of Season 1, which I can't help but talk about here. We'll talk about more later, but I just gotta touch on this now. In episode 23, Stowed Away Stowaways, and episode 24, The Battle of Witwicky, Croft's whole plan is laid out. Turns out the space bridge that Optimus had supposedly destroyed 15 years prior at the end of the Transformers War is still functional, and was rebuilt secretly by Croft. She plans to use a space bridge without Optimus or Megatron or any other Autobots knowing, by the way, to send G.H.O.S.T and the entire US Army to Cybertron, invade the supposedly dead planet, and conquer it in America's name. I was genuinely surprised by his direction for G.H.O.S.T and Croft, because it's something we've never seen before in a Transformers franchise. Sure, we've had human villains that try to control Transformers, never to the point of full-on invading Cybertron. Croft's bigotry towards Cybertronians is on full display in the last 4 episodes of EarthSpark, sharing Mandroid's beliefs that they're practically beneath humans. The terminology Croft uses to describe them in the Terrans is brutal, especially in comparison to how close our terminology is to, certain political figures and groups. Screw it, I'm just gonna say it. Croft and G.H.O.S.T are without a doubt in my mind meant to be a blatant characterization of the Trump administration and similar alt-right groups. Groups that are actively opposed to racial minorities and LGBT people. In this way, EarthSpark frames Cybertronians as immigrants, and the Terrans? They're the kids of said immigrants. Despite being born in America, they're still subjected to racism and racist treatment from the government just because of their parents, or in this case, parental figures. Hell, Croft literally goes as far to call the Terrans undocumented robots at one point, just to drive the point across.
We can't have undocumented robots running loose.
Never before have I seen such a vile and absolutely horrible human in the Transformers franchise before Croft. And it's because of this that I truly think she's the single best human villain the franchise has ever had. Better than Archival, better than any of those guys from Animated, better than Silas, definitely better than anything in Bayverse, and way better than Dr. Morocco and Rescue Bots. And even better than Mandroid, but that's only by a small margin. Croft is such a great villain because of how she represents people that are sadly in our world today. The fact that EarthSpark had the guts to show off such a character in a kid's show is to be applauded, and Kari Wahlgren played her fantastically. She's got a very broad history of voice acting across the industry. Jessica and Rick and Morty, Katana Melina in Mortal Kombat. Even for my Telltale fans, you might remember her as Mevia back in episode 8 of Minecraft Story Mode Season 1. G.H.O.S.T works as an evil faction so well because of how well Croft is both played and written. So kudos to you, EarthSpark. I am very excited to see what kinds of villains you create in Season 2 to one-up her. Now, I can gladly say we are done with covering Season 1B. It's now time to talk about the big finale of EarthSpark's first season. Did it stick the ending? Spoiler alert, it absolutely did.
The Maltos are the ones making the Earth a better place.
We are the legacy of hope.
Season 1C, which made up episodes 19 through 26 of EarthSpark, was released on July 29th, 2023, almost 5 months after Season 1B. It felt like we were waiting forever for these episodes, but in the end, I can proudly say they were definitely worth the wait. This batch of episodes is a lot tighter than the last 2 batches in terms of story. Season 1A was about Twitch and Thrash essentially learning how to be Transformers. Season 1B was that again, but for #Jawbreaker and Nightshade, for the most part. Aside from the first episode here in Season 1C, which sort of wraps up 1B by finally giving Jawbreaker his alt mode, the other 7 episodes are essentially 2 larger arcs meant to give closure to all the current plot threads in Season 1. Episodes 20 through 22 focus more on Robby and Mo growing alongside their Terran siblings, gaining new powers in the form of cybersleep weapons they can use to fight alongside them. Robby ends up getting a shield, fitting for him as episode 20, Disarmed, focuses on his desire to want to protect his family no matter what. And Mo gets an arm blade, personifying her desire to fight for her family no matter her opponent, as shown through her vision quest to Quintus Prime in episode 22, Prime Time. The second arc is covered in episodes 23 through 26. This arc is pretty much the end game of EarthSpark, throwing the Maltos and Autobots into a final confrontation against Croft, G.H.O.S.T, and Mandroid. And by God, does EarthSpark nail these last two arcs. Start with what I call the Cyber Sickness arc. Robby's attempts to master his Cyber Shield ability ends with his Cyber Sleeve getting fractured. This causes all the Malto children to lose their psychic connection they share, and therefore feel more distant as siblings. On top of that, Robby is now slowly dying from the broken sleeve infecting his body with some kind of virus. This leads us to episode 21, What Dwells Within, aka my second favorite episode in EarthSpark. While this episode is primarily about the Maltos trying to find a way to fix Robby's Cyber Sleeve and cure his illness, it's not really the spotlight of this episode. That, of course, comes in the form of a surprising relationship that forms between Hashtag and Starscream. Yes, that's right, Starscream.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I can't resist an open invitation to give Megatron a little what for.
If there's one legacy character in EarthSpark that I love almost as much as Breakdown, my beloved, it's Starscream. That's because for the first time truly in a Transformers cartoon, we've got a version of Starscream I absolutely love. A sympathetic one that could potentially be redeemed. The only other time we've seen such a Starscream is in the IDW comics. Quick summary for those who haven't read the original 2005 to 2018 IDW comics, Starscream was very abused by Megatron, both physically and emotionally. This culminated in the very good one-shot comic back in 2009, Spotlight Megatron. In this comic, after Starscream gets his lifelong dream of ruling the Decepticons for 3 years straight, it becomes too much for him to bear, and drives him to become borderline suicidal. When Megatron returns to the Decepticons after having been nearly killed by Optimus, he beats Starscream within an inch of his life. He smashes his cockpit, rips off his wings, slams his face into the moon until he's lost so many teeth and his nose is broken. But Megatron doesn't kill him. Even as Starscream cries on the ground begging Megatron to do so, he doesn't end his life. He likes having Starscream as a traitor second in command, helps keep him on his toes, and to a darker degree, Megatron enjoys taking his frustrations out on him. So he lets him live, knowing full well that Starscream can never bring himself to take his own life. This event specifically scars Starscream for the rest of the series, most prominently seen in the Windblade and Till All Are One comics. In these, Starscream is now president of Cybertron, with Windblade as his advisor. The two of them struggle to rebuild Cybertron and form a galactic council with its colony worlds. All of this time, Starscream struggles with forming proper friendships and even potentially a romance depending on how you look at it, with Windblade, Bumblebee, Chromia, and others. Megatron is finally out of his life, but he's horrified at the idea of him returning one day to take it all away from him, just like he did in Spotlight Megatron. That paranoia drives Starscream throughout these comics until, in the end, Starscream finally accepts that he has people that truly want to support him, be his friends, and so on. It's a very satisfying moment for someone like me who's a huge Starscream fan. EarthSpark Starscream is essentially IEW Starscream brought to life. We only get to truly know this version of Starscream over the course of 1.5 episodes, and yet the 30 or so minutes we do see him is enough for me and many others to fall in love with him. While it's never outright stated, EarthSpark heavily implies that he and potentially Shockwave became the new leaders of the Decepticons after Megatron defected to the Autobots. Like most of the other cons, Starscream was imprisoned after the war ended and has been so for seemingly the past 15 years. He finally gets to escape alongside his fellow Seekers in episode 21, What Dwells Within, after a power outage in the ghost prison caused by Robby's Cyber Sleeve break in the previous episode. Long story short, during their escape, Starscream runs into the Maltos underground while they search for a reservoir of special cave water that can hopefully fix Robby's Cyber Sleeve. All the Terrans and Maltos are very weary and untrusting of Starscream, most likely due to stories I'm sure they've had read in comics or first-hand accounts told by B, Optimus, or Megatron. See here how Thrash describes Starscream as basically the most selfish Decepticon.
What did you expect? Starscream's as selfish as they come.
The way Thrash describes him, it's almost like he's perfectly describing G1 Starscream here, or Cyberverse, or even Skybound Starscream. Oh god, I really hope he doesn't mean Skybound Starscream because, whoo boy, he is something. Anyway, the interesting thing here is what Starscream says in retort against what Twitch says after that Skywarp and Novastorm should go back to Megatron, a mech who, in her eyes, wouldn't abandon his team. Context for this, by the way, is that essentially they're all being chased by this big energon-sucking creature called the Dweller. Novastorm got grabbed and nearly killed, but Starscream froze up when she begged him for help.
You should go back to following Megatron. He wouldn't leave anyone behind like that.
Ah, naive child. Is locking Decepticons in prison while he walks free, not leaving us behind? You don't know the real Megatron. The ruthless tyrant who ruled over us with fear and intimidation.
While none of the Maltos seems to pay what Starscream says any mind, his words strike a chord with Hashtag. And I am serious when I tell you that her relationship with Starscream is absolutely my favorite Terran/Legacy bot duo in this entire show. A few come close, like Twitch with Megatron or Jawbreaker with Alita, But man, does Hashtag and Starscream feed me good. This comes into play towards the end of the episode, where the two of them are separated from the rest of their group. Hashtag discovered earlier that the doors in the tunnel system are somehow linked to her body, and so she can force them open or closed at her will. Starscream tries to force Hashtag to abandon her family and help him escape, gaslighting her into believing that they would leave her behind if they were in her position. Starscream gets more and more desperate with trying to get Hashtag to help him, until she finally snaps at him with this line.
You have to, or else I...
Is this how Megatron treated you?
You believe me?
Every single time I see this, it gives me chills. The way Hashtag just blurts out how Megatron potentially gaslit Starscream in the same way Starscream was trying with her. The way how Starscream actually looks taken aback by Hashtag's willingness to believe a story and relate to him with her own trauma from being controlled by Mandroid. And don't even get me started on how genuinely shocked he sounds at little "you believe me" line. I want to hug him so badly. I believe this voice acting from Starscream is incredible, and we have to thank the equally incredible Steve Blum for this performance. Yes, that's right, Steve Blum is back once again as Starscream after an almost 10-year hiatus of voicing him last time in Prime and RID-15. It's absolutely crazy how despite Steve Blum using generally the same Starscream voice he used for Prime, he's able to make him sound like a completely different version of the character. Prime Starscream was dark, calculating, a genuine menace, if not a little pathetic at times. Most Starscreams usually are, after all. But EarthSpark Starscream is different. Sure, he may act off-putting and selfish like Prime Starscream did, but this is because, as Hashtag sees, it's a trauma response he has to the abuse he most likely received from Megatron. Now granted, we have yet to actually see any of the abuse EarthSpark Starscream may have went through, but just through Steve Blum's performance as him alone, it's apparent that it's pretty big. Especially to the point that when Megatron shows up later on to try and stop Starscream what he believes to be an attempt to kill/hurt the Terrans, Starscream seems to hallucinate the Decepticon symbol back on his chest. This might be a developer oversight and simply just a mistake on the animation team's part, but it still says something that the only time we see Megatron with this symbol in this episode is when he's being physically abusive to Starscream. Megatron may have seen the error of his ways as an Autobot now, but I love how EarthSpark still holds him accountable for his mistakes as a Decepticon. Take the end of the episode for instance, when Megatron tries to apologize to Starscream and offer a safe place for him and the Seekers to hide.
I won't let you put me back in a cage.
What if you could go somewhere safe?
Nowhere is safe if it's with you.
The fact that Starscream outright refuses and rejects Megatron's apology is a great message to send to kids, especially those who might be fellow victims of abuse. Just because your abuser sees the error of their ways and asks for forgiveness doesn't mean you have to be the bigger person and accept their apology. You can resent someone for how they mistreated you and it doesn't make you a bad person. Here, Starscream rejects Megatron's apology, but he's not painted as a bad guy for it. Megatron hurt Starscream. To what degree, we don't know yet, but hopefully it'll be something shown at some point in Season 2. And the way that Starscream changes as a character through this episode is unlike anything we've seen in other versions of him. His connection with Hashtag totally changes his character. When Hashtag sacrifices herself to save Megatron from the Dweller towards the end of this episode, Starscream chases after it to save her soon after. He even tries to get it to eat him in the effort that Hashtag will escape. This gets even more significant in the finale, when it's Starscream who manages to rally all of the newly freed Decepticons to help the Terrans defeat Mandroid once and for all. EarthSpark Starscream has become such a selfless character thanks to how seriously Hashtag took his trauma. I'm not the only one who loves EarthSpark Starscream, by the way. Take a listen to my friends Comodin, Cam, and Emperor Kumquat and see how they enjoyed this take on him as well.
Especially when it came to the Starscream episode, like that is just the beginning of an arc to me, you know. Starscream's not ready to forgive Megatron for all the things that he's done to him in the past, and I hope that something happens in Season 2 where we could potentially see, for once, a healthy Megatron and Starscream relationship, you know what I mean? Like them actually being allies for a change and not always trying to dethrone each other.
My favorite episode so far was probably the favorite of many others, the Underground episode with Starscream, which gave us an emotional Starscream who is not the usual, irredeemable jerk. For so long, people have wanted to see a Starscream be emphasized with, and then for him to return the kindness he is given. Not just like Armada Starscream, but a sly and bad Starscream who learns how to be good. That episode was like the dream come true of 1,000 Transformers Prime fanfictions. I definitely appreciated a Starscream dimension who wasn't just going to be a backstabbing coward and nothing more.
I really hope we get to see more of Starscream in Season 2. Whether it be him and Hashtag hanging out more, or learning more of what his and Megatron's relationship was back during the war, I need this stuff answered. Alright, well, my little detour with Starscream dragged on a little more than I thought it would. Let's wrap up this video by getting back to the main plot of Season 1 Sea of EarthSpark, the final arc of the story, or as I like to call it, the Last Hope arc.
I'll be honest. We don't stand much chance against Mandroid, but we're their last hope. What do you say?
Eventually, Mo manages to find a way to cure Robby's cybersleeve illness by getting the power of the Emberstone imbued within herself, something that EarthSpark simplifies by calling it Prime Power. This eventually leads to Bumblebee being sent on a mission to investigate G.H.O.S.T, who Optimus has officially lost all trust with after finding one of Mandroid's mind control chips there. The Maltos tag along without Bumblebee knowing, where they all discover the aforementioned space bridge I brought up back when I talked about Croft. After discovering this, the Maltos try to get Ancient Schloder to give up his supposed vendetta against Bumblebee and help them take down Croft and the rest of G.H.O.S.T. This is where I have a big problem. Now, back in the past 20 or so episodes, it seemed like Schloder has some kind of beef with B. He's been so obsessed with hunting him down as we saw back in Classified and Security Protocols, but here, in the end of the show, we learn that the reason Schloder is so dead set on capturing Bumblebee is not because he hates him, but instead, much like Alex Malto, Schloder is a huge Bumblebee fan and wants him to join G.H.O.S.T so that they can track down Decepticons together. This is probably the last big thing I have a problem with in EarthSpark. I don't hate the idea of Schloder being a B-fan boy, but the way he acted throughout the show does not give off that impression. Like, why did he try so hard to seemingly kill him back in Security Protocols? It doesn't make any sense. To me, I think this would have worked a lot better if either A, we knew from the start Schloder was a B fanboy and was obsessed with him joining G.H.O.S.T, or B, he genuinely did hate B like the show had made him out to be, only to have a change of heart thanks to what the Maltos tell him. The fact that this comes out of nowhere kind of ruins the momentum his character had going for him. But now that it's out in the open, I hope the writers give his character a major rework in Season 2, as someone who constantly fawns over Bumblebee whenever they're paired up. So Schloder agrees to help B and the Maltos, they fight Croft and escape, and then we get to the true endgame. Croft unleashes a whole army of ghost robots on the Malto homestead, which she has named Goids, planning to arrest the entire family. Thankfully though, they're promptly taken down by Optimus, Megatron, and the other Autobots when they come to assist the Maltos. Just when they're about to defeat Croft, however, she pulls out her trump card. A device designed to immobilize anyone wearing a ghost badge, she lets the device attach itself to her hand, injecting her with energon and single-handedly taking down everyone. To make matters worse, Mandroid suddenly arrives as well, with a fully robotic body. In an effort to cure himself of a slow death from energon poisoning, he's transformed his entire body into a cyborg one. His head is about the only human part left of him, suspended in a giant suit of armor holding what seems to be a large tub of energon inside it. His new body even gives him the ability to drain energon from other beings utilizing his tail that also functions as a spear. With 2 Sharkticon enforcers he brought along with him, he manages to capture the entire Malto family save for the Terrans, draining the prime power from Robby and Mo's cybersleeves to put his plan into motion. This leaves Twitch, Nightshade, Bumblebee, Schloder, and later the other Terrans as the only ones left to stop Mandroid's plan. Without a doubt, these last 2 episodes are the darkest EarthSpark gets in its first season, and after a relatively more lighthearted, upbeat previous 24 episodes for the most part, what happened next is a shocking, but also very impactful tonal change. When the Terrans sneak into the ghost base to try and stop Mandroid, we learn exactly what his plan is. Utilizing the space bridge Croft rebuilt, as well as the prime power he stole from Robby and Mo, Mandroid plans to use the space bridge as a doomsday weapon. A weapon that will emit an energy wave around the entire planet, killing any energon-based living beings on Earth. Essentially, a complete ethnic cleansing of Cybertronians. Mandroid decides to demonstrate said weapon on Croft of all characters. In an instant, Schloder, alongside Twitch, Nightshade, and Bumblebee, is forced to watch his own sister suffer what is arguably one of the most brutal deaths I've seen a villain get in a children's show. For about a minute straight, we're forced to watch Croft get electrocuted and disintegrated, writhing on the floor and screaming in pain as all of her limbs turn to dust one by one before she finally explodes in a giant ball of electricity. Now, I'm not gonna say she didn't have it coming, but still, it is absolutely amazes me that the EarthSpark animation team is able to get such a death broadcast on a Y7 show. Now, of course, there's something inherently violent about Croft's death. We're not seeing her explode in a big mess of blood and gore like an episode of The Boys or Castlevania, but still, you hear bone snapping, you see her arms and legs turn to dust. Sure, there's only a big scorch mark left on the floor after she dies, but still, you're watching a woman be electrocuted to death and vaporized. I don't know how EarthSpark got away with this, but part of me really hopes they keep this level of brutality going into Season 2. After Croft's death, Mandroid begins his plan, charge up the space bridge by turning it into a giant tower that pierces the sky. The Terrans, B and Schloder push to the tower and fight Mandroid with all they've got, going up against him as well as the possessed versions of Optimus, Megatron, and all the other Autobots. Fortunately though, they're not alone. As I said earlier back in Starscream's section, the Seeker is able to convince all the other Decepticons to assist the Terrans in fighting Mandroid. Soundwave, Swindle, Hardtop, even Breakdown, my beloved, comes in to save B. Like, come on, that little wink he gives him? There is no way these two aren't gay as f***. The final battle, though, is a straight 2v1, Twitch and Thrash versus Mandroid. It's the perfect last setting for the show in my opinion. As much as I love hashtag Nightshade, Jawbreaker, Robby, and Mo, Twitch and Thrash were the ones who essentially started EarthSpark's story. It was their birth that was the catalyst for everything. They were the ones we as the audience watched grow over the past 25 episodes, learning to fight and live and truly become Transformers. To see their potential fully realized in this tag team against the exact antithesis of everything their existence is the perfect finale for this show. But despite how well they've trained and all the new skills they've acquired, that alone isn't enough. Mandroid is able to survive long enough to activate his weapon, and within a few seconds, everyone dies. Megatron, Starscream, the Terrans, Bumblebee, Breakdown, my beloved, everyone. Even Mandroid dies, laughing with his last few breaths and calling himself a hero for weaponized Cybertronians from the planet. Or so he thinks. While every Cybertronian on the planet seemingly died, Twitch was able to just barely survive thanks to Thrash covering her with his own body. It has seemed nearly as harrowing as Croft's death. Watching Twitch, who at this point, mind you, nearly has one of her wings broken off and an eye broken, watches her brother die in her arms. It's made even sadder by the incredible music that plays in this scene. This oddly beautiful but tragic synth horn that Crush Effect composed. Robby, Mo, Dot, and Alex finally free themselves and see Twitch cradling Thrash's dead body, realizing that Mandroid has won. Or so it seems. Robby's cybersleeve starts to glow soon after he and Mo wake up, realizing that their prime power seems to have returned to them. How this happened, though, is unclear. In my mind, I like to imagine that this was a gift from Quintus Prime himself. Think about it. Every time Quintus Prime's powers come into play in EarthSpark, it was when the Maltos needed it most. Hashtag Nightshade and Jawbreaker were only born due to Mo's desperation to have someone save her, Robby, Alex, Twitch, and Thrash in the cave. When the force field came into play to help break Hashtag out of her mind control and home, it only appeared when Twitch refused to give up on breaking through to her sister, accompanied by the rest of her siblings. In prime time, Mo only got the power to heal Robby and fix his cyber sleeve after she realized just how important she was to her family. Therefore, I believe the reason why Robby and Mo got their prime power back in this case was Quintus Prime rewarding the Maltos for how the Terrans, literally, gave their lives in an effort to stop Mandroid. They may have ultimately failed, sure, but they still gave it their all against a seemingly unstoppable force. And in today's day and age, when so many people are facing their own struggles against seemingly impossible obstacles, I think knowing that your determination can and will be rewarded is a great message to give to children. So with their power back, Robby and Mo undo the damage done by Mandroid. They reprogram the space bridge to send a new energy wave across Earth, this one reviving everyone previously killed by the last one. Fun fact, the song meant to play in this ending bit was actually going to be The Touch by Stan Bush. The storyboards were even timed to the song. Ultimately though, they weren't able to get the rights to it, but I honestly don't mind it one bit. The finale song here, Crush Effect composed for the end, where all the Terrans, Autobots, and Decepticons are revived, serves as a perfect finale song. And so, after Thrash is the last one to be healed and revived by the space bridge, the entire Malto family celebrates their victory as the sun rises over Woodwiki. As they do, a mysterious emblem is projected into the sky over everyone. It vaguely resembles the Autobot insignia, but it's different, unique. It's a symbol of the Terrans, finally having found their own identity among their fellow Autobots and Decepticons. And with this discovery, the Maltos see the start of a new day, eager to start a new chapter in their lives, and their Terran children ready to continue carving their own corner of the world for themselves to live in however they choose. And so, that is all I have to say on Transformers EarthSpark Season 1. Before I give my final thoughts on the show though, I want to post the final thoughts of everyone else who contributed to this video here. Again, huge thanks to Comodin Cam, Emperor Kumquat, Jaymotions, and Little Miss TFC for contributing to this. It means the world to me that you all were so eager to share what you love about EarthSpark here for everyone to see.
Of course, every season doesn't have to be a simple case of good guy versus bad guy, but I just think that, like with Transformers Animated, there's so much more you can do, and I just hope it doesn't end like Animated, where it's just cut off too soon, because they focused way too much on these new characters. I want there to be a balance. I want there to be a balance of legacy characters and the new characters. I want them to have equal amounts of screen time with each other and make them actually kind of work together. You know, we can have a few episodes where it's focused on one part of a Transformers story, and then we can have them all kind of come together in a way, in a good story arc. So it's really up to the writers. I don't know what they're cooking. I'm still looking forward to it regardless, but yeah, this season 1, it has its ups and downs, but honestly, every Transformers show has kind of had its ups and downs in the first season. And it's really up to the next seasons to really, amp it up a bit. I think generally most Transformers fans just want season 1 to get out of the way just so we can get into season 2, because so much has been established already. So we don't have to worry about all these origin plots, we can get straight into expanding with more characters and settings, etc. And that's another thing I want from EarthSpark. I want a different location. I want to see more of Earth and potentially Cybertron even. I don't know. Give us a show where the Transformers actually go to Cybertron and stay on Cybertron for a bit, and maybe it'll be fun for the Terrans to see Cybertron, and the humans as well. Once again, there's more to Transformers than Earth. It just needs to find that spark.
EarthSpark is a great Transformers show if you want a warm story about humans and robots all being part of a family. Not to say that the show doesn't have its dark and creepy moments like death or showing creatures so disgusting and scary that I was impressed they made it into a kids show. But EarthSpark focuses on the meaningful relationships between siblings and between children, their parents, or mentors. Of course, they are threatened by an evil military and a mad scientist, rogue Decepticons too, but there are lessons to be learned as the family fights them together. The new characters and the recharacterization of classic characters is a breath of fresh air. Sure, we have Optimus, Megatron, and Bumblebee, but Optimus is not a perfect noble leader, Megatron is good now and friends with a human, and Bumblebee isn't the cute mascot of the show. In fact, he doesn't like how some humans fanboy over him. It's like the show is poking fun at how merchandised Bumblebee has become. Then we have characters like Tarantulas, Grimlock, and Elita 1 with completely different voices and personalities than what we're used to. EarthSpark shows us how we can change things up to keep it interesting. Even in design, they gave us a fresh new look for Soundwave. In whole, the show felt bold and brave to me. I respected their choice to do the unexpected. I certainly could never guess what outforms the Terrans would get. I was ready for your typical cars and jets. This random assortment does not include safe choices that Hasbro would normally ask for to sell toys. Like how in Robots in Disguise 2015, Grimlock was not supposed to be there but be a different Dinobot. But then Hasbro said it had to be a T-Rex because kids like that more. EarthSpark did a Stiggy Moloch and wasn't afraid to teach young viewers about what this dinosaur was, instead of just showing kids what they were already familiar with. This show has a nice message of you are who you are, and that's okay even if it's different than what's most often expected. Within the show, Tarantulas tells us that the alt modes of the Transformers are an expression of who they are. So much about this show is different than its predecessors, and whether you like the show and its warm fuzziness or find it too cheesy, its bravery is remarkable. Is EarthSpark my absolute favorite show? No, but it could be for some. It is playful and wholesome and undeniably creative. It is certainly not in your face controversial, but those who find it so are focused too much on a couple of seconds of EarthSpark. I say give it a chance, relax, and enjoy a fresh Transformers story.
EarthSpark feels like Transformers, written by people like me who grew up loving it. It digs deep into the many questions and curiosities a fan would want to explore further with these characters, something made clear by how the show handles the psychological connection the Transformers have to their alt modes. I've always loved when their shows would explore the eccentricities of vehicles and beast modes. The approach taken by EarthSpark is not only a refreshing take on this, but an in-depth one that makes for wonderful metaphors to real-life experiences. It's personal enough to the characters that it makes for riveting character writing, but open-ended enough that just about anyone can take something out of it. Something I've personally explored about this franchise was its connection to war, and I'm happy to say that EarthSpark handles this topic wonderfully. Transformers has always been deeply connected to violence and war since the very beginning, which makes sense. It was an action cartoon in the 80s, that was kind of the trend of the time, but this is something that still persists to this day. Don't mistake this for me being negative about it. I have a deep love for how Transformers has handled the topic in the past with nuance, and sometimes it's even just for the cool factor, but EarthSpark tries something new. Something the Transformers fanbase ironically has a history of responding to poorly. EarthSpark is glimmering proof that you don't need to be a brooding drama about the darkness of war to be a wonderful and mature take on Transformers. Megatron and Optimus will still bicker, but there's no more scheming, or blood feud between the two. The Decepticons and some Autobots are fugitives, and there's a present, if a little shaky, acceptance of Cybertronians. And with the Terrans, we get to explore the next generation, and see how some of the most beloved and classic characters in the Transformers canon will shape them to be better and not make the same mistakes. This is what I mean when I say EarthSpark feels like Transformers written by fans of it. This is the stuff I found myself wishing I could see in other Transformers media I consumed, and EarthSpark heartily delivers. Don't miss out on this show. This is some of the best Transformers media on the market.
EarthSpark is a show that means a lot to me as a disabled LGBTQ+ person of color. Like, for a long time, we rarely ever have human protagonists of colors in the shows and movies. Even with shows like Animated and Prime, the humans are side characters that get pushed aside as these shows go on, like, unfortunately. However, seeing the Maltos being given enough screen time alongside the robots and being given their own personalities and quirks is a refreshing change of things. Additionally, I appreciate this show's message about having a disability be a part of you, through adult Malto still being a badass mama even with her prosthetic leg. Overall, along with excellent writing, great humor and heart, and changing things up for Transformers EarthSpark deserves all the respect and love it deserves.
So why do I believe EarthSpark is the best Transformers cartoon we have ever gotten? It does have its faults, sure, ranging from dropped plot lines, characters who don't get much spotlight as they deserve, and sudden revelations that seem to come out of nowhere, but these cons are far outweighed by the pros. An incredibly strong and diverse main cast, episodes that keep the audience engaged while also teaching important life lessons for today's generation. And above all else, it's just a fun show. Sure, people love a good edgy tale, but there's nothing wrong with telling a story full of heart as well, where the message is, it's okay to just be you. You may not be a robot from another world, or have a robot sleeve that lets you read others' thoughts and feelings, but you may resonate with so much else in this show. You may be a child of immigrants. You may be a victim of abuse. You may be struggling with relationships with your own parents or children. You may be disabled and feel like you're a burden to your family. You may even be gay, non-binary, or another part of the LGBT family, and be afraid of what others will think of you because of that. But EarthSpark is here to tell you that you can be all these things and still be entitled to a full, happy life. You are worthy of love. You are loved, even if you don't feel like you are. Someone in your life cares about you, and as long as you have that one person or few people by your side, you are going to be okay. I promise. So with all that said and done, what would I rate Transformers EarthSpark Season 1? How does it compare to Prime, Animated, and other Transformers shows? It's hard to rate it to shows that have had 3 or more seasons and many years to garner an audience, to be honest, while EarthSpark has only been around for just a bit over a year as of this video. But if we're just talking about Season 1, I would easily give it a solid 9 out of 10. And with more work, I am sure that Season 2 will be able to go even further. Speaking of, as of this video's release, we do not have a solid release date for Season 2. It was, however, confirmed back at New York Comic Con 2022, and in summer of 2023, we got confirmation from Dot and Wheeljack's VAs that they had begun recording for Season 2. On top of that, many artists on Twitter have also confirmed back in January of 2023 that they had done storyboard work on Season 2, one of which being Lillian Fiedler. She is an amazing artist you might recognize for her unique versions of Megatron and Starscream that are gender-bent. I was lucky enough to get a commission a comic from her a few years ago, and I am very excited to see what she brings to the fight scenes in Season 2. On top of that, an interview was conducted with Dale Malinowski and Ant Ward back in September, shortly after Season 1 of EarthSpark wrapped up, as to what we can expect from Season 2. I want to save most of this for another video I'll be putting out soon, but to make it short right now, Season 2 will feature many new characters, both brand new to the series, as well as legacy characters as well. We already know from toy leaks that one of these new legacy characters will be Prowl. Also, the themes of Season 2 will be far darker than Season 1. While family will still be the core theme of the entire show of EarthSpark, Malinowski and Ward say that trust, growing up, and loss will be the main themes of Season 2 specifically. The theme of loss really excites me, and worries me at the same time. Are we looking at a potential major death in the Malto family in Season 2? Right now though, it's anyone's guess, but I for one cannot wait to see what's in store next for the Maltos and Terrans. Thank you all so much for watching my review of Transformers EarthSpark Season 1. This is the first time ever I've done such a big video essay, so I hope I did a good job with it. One last time, huge thank you again to Comodin Cam, Emperor Kumquat, Jaymotions, and Little Miss TFC for all offering their own thoughts on EarthSpark for this video. I'll be sure to link to all their channels in this video's description if you want to check out more of their stuff. That's gonna be it from me now, but don't worry, I am far from done with EarthSpark on this channel. If you can't wait to see what else I've got cooking, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later.